Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Animo Wine Co podcast. My name is David Clarke. Today on the podcast we have Chris Alheit, otherwise known as Butch. We discuss Alheit Vineyards. He is one of the most important winemakers in modern South Africa. Really lovely guy, very humble, makes amazing wines. We go through each of his wines that he's made under the Alheit Vineyards label. So buckle up, get a glass of Chenin, and join me now. Today I have Chris Alheit. Butchie, last time we spoke, I looked it up. It seemed like it was 2-3 years ago, but it was actually just over 5 years ago.
Hard to
on
believe.
The 22nd of November 2018 in the flourishing suburb of Clarke.
I remember.
So we're 5 years later, and so that chat we had was really about you and Susie's sort of origin story, about how you met and how you started Alheit Vineyards and the story so far. Yeah. But I thought it was overdue, or well overdue for a catch up to find out what you guys been doing in the last 5 years, which is
just more of the same,
which is significant. Just ticking along. But I thought it might be a really great opportunity to go through each wine, not necessarily the current vintage, but the vineyards and the idea behind each of the wine labels.
Cool.
You run with. So maybe to start with, let's roll back the clock back to 2018.
Yes.
What's been happening since then, mate?
Well, I have to think quite a lot. Shortly after that chat we had, we bought Christo's old farm on the Paardeberg, Nieuwedam.
Yep.
That was a really like a big thing for us.
So what did that farm consist of at the time?
Well, it's it's just so expensive to develop and to farm a piece of land that we haven't changed it that much. We've done quite a bit to it, but it's effectively 104 hectares of really, really good Paardeberg land on a ridge. Mm-hmm. Rim ridge.
The rim covered, yeah.
On a ridge between the Ubergskloof and the Aprilskloof. Okay. So from that ridge we look to the left, you'll see the old observatory cellar, and to the right you'll see Langkloof and Sadi family. Yes. Yeah, so that's where it's located. But on that 104 hectares, there's about 27 hectares of natural bush on top, which we're going to try to keep as untouched as we can. And then there's what is it now? It was 22 hectares on paper of of bush vines, of mature bush vines.
On the whiteboard, it's 22 hectares.
Yeah, on the whiteboard. So that's what we bought. But when we did a survey of the vineyards to see what was dead and what's alive.
Oh right, I see.
Yeah, it added up to around 16 hectares worth of actual living functional vines. Okay. So a lot of the last few years has been interplanting new vines, from starting down at block 1 at the bottom of the farm, and working up the ridge. We've got about 2.5 blocks left to interplant. Right. Yeah. So we're interplanting young stuff just to try to fill the gaps in the vineyards.
So essentially about 20% was dead, more or less.
Give or take.
Okay.
Some of the blocks are a lot worse than others.
Okay.
Like the one that we tackled first, block 1 was really bad. Okay. Yeah. And a lot of that was like kaput, and it was just the previous owners were kind of a victim of the whole milieu in selling grapes in the South African wine industry. It's a mug's game. It's not a good sport to partake in, especially if your yields are like 1 to 2 tons a hectare, which is the reality that we're sitting with there now. We had a terrific year last year, 2022, where we got almost 3 tons a hectare. But I mean, those are pitiful figures. And it's still not massive numbers. No, so trying to sell grapes and trying to make that work doesn't leave you with a hell of a lot of options. So I think the previous owners did what they could to maintain the place, but there was,
just a lack of capital coming in for
reinvestment. I mean, they just couldn't do what was needed.
And from memory, it was Chenin and Pinotage?
That's right. Yeah. Mostly Chenin, and there was about 1.5 hectares of Pinotage.
Okay, right. Yeah. I thought there might have been more, but okay, right.
Yeah, but the Pinotage died.
Right.
Yes.
Like deliberately?
Death.
Just like...
Death by tractor.
Yeah.
Recently.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, it was murdered.
And did you give it a little go for a couple of years? And then
I did. Yeah. I had a winery intern called Moran, lovely guy, who works in the Jura. He's got a family business called Fume Châtelain. And he knows his way around reds. He's made a lot of Trousseau and Poulsard in his life, and thought I kind of, I felt like, okay, just let's hand it over to the Frenchman. And he did a great job with we tried what was this, 2020 maybe, 2021?
Okay. 21,
I think.
Right.
The wine came out pretty well. And then, after a couple of years in bottle, I noticed that it was developing in Afrikaans you say kenmerkend, I don't know what the English word is, typical, I guess, pinotage, a little bitterness sort of rising in the bottle.
Yeah, right.
Acrolein. That's probably due to, I could have been a bit more conventional in the winemaking there, maybe filtered it or something radical like that, and it might not have gone that way. But unfortunately, it's not saleable.
Right, okay.
Not that I just made it for fun. It's never going to be under Alheit Vineyards. And then in 22, we made a rosé.
Okay.
And that actually turned out pretty well. Yes. So we released that under a white label. We've got like a white label series we do for the mailing list.
Okay.
So that's gone out for sale now, just the other day.
1 ton a hectare rosé. That sounds really lucrative.
I think we got like 2.5 tons a hectare.
Oh, well, there you go. That makes a little difference.
So, and as it turns out, the Taj actually makes pretty good rosé.
Perfect.
Barrel aged it. It was very pale.
Okay.
And drinkable.
Onion skin.
Onion skin, as they say. I may or may not have blended it in with a few other grapes just to give it a bit of pep.
Yes, right. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, there is a bit of Riesling in there.
Yeah. Use the 15% that size.
Yeah, use that 15%. Just to turn that kind of sort of slightly dreary pinotage into something magnificent. Well, it's actually really good. I'm very proud of the wine.
I mean, you have to be responsible for something. It's not all up to Mother Nature, surely.
Exactly. I have to apply my so-called winemaking skills at some stage. Yeah.
So you were buying fruit off that farm
for a long time.
Right?
Yeah, since the beginning. I mean, Rosa introduced us to Krista, and that was a really nice working relationship. I remember like getting there, like sort of 5:30 in the morning for the picks, and Krista, and sometimes her mum would be there, and they'd always have like Namibian Germans, and they'd always have like these like German sort of brown bread sandwiches, with little ham and strong coffee. It was very cool.
Now the Germans do breakfast properly.
They do breakfast, yeah. Bauernfrühstück they call it, the farmer's breakfast. So we had many breakfasts early on that farm and had a great working relationship with Krista, and that conversation, about her situation and what she wanted to do, and what the farm meant for her. As much as she loved the land, it was either all or nothing. You either 100% in on the farm. She has a wine brand of her own that she wanted to pursue, and then the reality of selling the place was sort of rising in her mind, and we were in a space where we thought, okay, it would probably be a good idea sometime in the next year or 2 or 3 to get a hold of a good piece of land that we can walk the talk. We've talked a lot about agriculture and how we think it should be done, and then actually doing it.
Yes.
Actually climbing in and it's taken me from being sympathetic to the cause of the bush vine grape farmer to, being massively sympathetic to the cause of the bush vine grape farmer. It's not the easiest thing in the world. Especially dry farm vineyards in the Cape, and we've had a few dry years.
Because you haven't moved to the farm, have you?
No, that's the...
Because you still live...
we live in Amanus. Yeah, it's been a big conversation in our household over the last few years.
And so what's the drive time?
To get to Niverdam, it takes me, depending on traffic, anywhere between 2 hours and 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
That seems like a difficult position to be in to farm it.
Yeah.
Especially as you're saying, it's...
Yeah, it's been tricky, but we've got there's a lady in the Swartland called Ster. Suzaan is her name. Everyone calls her Ster Malan, and she's got a very good vineyard team that she works with. She worked for years with the Molyneux and a few other guys, and she was referred to us by a few different people. So she's been involved with the hands and feet, actual like execution of the work since we bought the place, and she's done a terrific job. So, there is an old farmhouse on the property. I think it's 130 plus years old now. We're busy renovating it right now. So the idea is to get a viticulturist into the company. That's like the next move, is to get a in-house viticulturist who can work with Etienne. Etienne's sort of the brains behind the vineyards.
Blanc.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic vineyard man.
Yeah.
To get someone to work, with Etienne, but to be 100% available all the time.
Yeah, right.
And to be based on Niverdam and be able to like work with Ster on the Niverdam vineyards, because it's too much for one person.
Yeah.
And Ster's got the team to work with, and then also to drive up and down the coast and fulfill the work that I need to get to. But just because of family life and commitments, I can't always do. Can't always get to Skurfberg more than a couple of times in a quarter.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to work out how much how much road time you have to put in with these disparate vineyards.
I've never really calculated it, but it's significant.
But I think we'll put a map up or something, and
I love it.
You've got a map on the website as well. Which
we've got like one of those antique maps, and we use it on our little on the wrappings for the single vineyards as well. But no, there's quite a bit of driving. No, they're not close.
There's a couple kind of close, but like they're
Well, I mean so our whole setup is kind of inconvenient in some ways. Like we, if it wasn't for the fact that the kids are so well established in Hermanus, and we've got our whole we've been there for 12 years plus, so socially we've got a great network of people there, lovely community, really good friends, and kids are super happy. They're very well established. They've got good buddies. So to uproot them now, just
but also the winery that you were able to use was based in Hemel-en-Aarde.
It's based in Hemel-en-Aarde, and that's the opportunity we got, from dear old family friends of ours, Hans and Marianne, that have been a huge part of our lives for the last decade plus, and gave us an opportunity. As I said to you last time, we just had this idea. We really wanted to make wine, a very specific type of wine, and nowhere to do it, and no money to do it. So Hans had this dream of doing it like an olive oil type farm in the Hemel-en-Aarde, but he had bought some winery equipment. So we he basically shoehorned a winery out of a barn. We did the floor and a drainage system, and we're still making wine in the same place. So we've had to modify it quite a bit, but it's functional. It works, and we've got a good working relationship with Hans and Mary. So I can't see us moving from there anytime too soon, as long as they'll have us. So it's a rented winery in the Hemel-en-Aarde, which is odd for someone who's focused on, dry farmed old vineyards, which mostly occur, west of the mountains.
So certainly not in the Overberg.
So and that's been built into our business from the beginning. I understand that our setup is a bit strange. Many people that run into our wines overseas, they think that we're based in the Swartland. I understand why, but we're not.
Hemel-en-Aarde. Well, it's an interesting one because a lot of guides do sort of regional guides.
Yeah.
And so would you be listed in the Swartland? Because that's it's not even only in the Swartland. You've got wines north of the Swartland and in Stellenbosch, or are you are you listed? And this is the problem that these regional listings have in places like New World countries.
Yeah, we're a bit of an odd duck, and it has probably not played in our favour.
There's been a sort of this sort of no man's land, or do you get it listed everywhere? Or,
it's definitely a shortcoming in our business, but it also it's given us quite a bit of freedom to do things, that a regionally attached winery might have struggled to do. So I think we've had that freedom, but there is a weakness.
I think it also speaks of the relative immaturity of the South African fine wine scene, that these things are still playing out amongst the best producers currently in the country, that they no one really knows where they're from or based. It's such a crazy dynamic industry over the last 10 to 20 years. And doesn't seem to be slowing down much. It seems to be getting more and more complicated rather than
definitely going through changes.
I
think in some ways positive, in some ways maybe negative, but there's a lot of, mostly positive, I guess. There's a lot of super interesting things happening in the Cape. And frankly, for our type of business, our winery could be located anywhere.
Yes.
Hermanus is, for those who don't know the town, it's a pretty great little town. I know you've got family connections to the place. Just the other day after school, I got home from work pretty early at about 3 o'clock and fetched the kids from school, and it was a hot day, and we could all just go for a long swim in the sea, before homework. Which is pretty cool. And as much as I love Stellenbosch and Paarl, you just can't do that there.
No.
Yeah. So we've had this ongoing debate in the household now. Do we relocate to the Boerland for the sake of the schools, because the schools are really good, or do we stick around in Hermanus where the schools are solid? Maybe don't have the same sort of reputation as the Boerland schools, but are good schools, and continue in our town and try to be a part of.
Or you do the whole boarding thing and all that stuff.
It's the childhood's so short, I don't know if we want to send them away. Maybe it works for some people, but I think we want to try to keep our family together for the 18 years that we've got, and then they're gone. And they want to get out of there and do their own thing, and that's cool. Hopefully by then they're sort of mature enough not to make any drastic mistakes. We'll see what happens.
Well, let's hope they take after their mother.
the responsible one.
Yes. Okay, I spoke to the Punch the other day.
Oh, good man.
Punchy.
Love that guy.
He'd started with you already, I
I
think
can't
17?
remember what year it was. He
16
worked
or
with us
17,
for
I think.
5 years, so
Yeah.
I think it was actually I've got to say 2015 might have been his first year.
Yeah, but then it was like,
I think it was 15.
but 18 he left, 19 he left?
No, 15. He was with us till 20.
20, right,
Yeah.
okay.
And
Well, that's right, it was
no
COVID. Yeah, he left, and then it was COVID.
When did Gabe start? Gabriel started in 20.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so Franco Lawrence, when he was our first assistant winemaker, and yes, he made a big impact there. Changed my life. Because it was just too much work for one person. And also, since we last spoke, we always had someone helping us with our admin. That was Heidi Lawler, and she was working with us and with Chris Alheit and with Thorn and Daughters. And then I think around 2020, we started. We got our own in-house person, Tanya Fourie, whose husband Johan is the winemaker at Benguela. And she's also made a huge impact. So we're slowly but surely kind of building as a business where we've got the human capital to function at a high level. Because we started as basically a glorified garage operation. And I've got no business training, and my management acumen is probably not so hot, and I'm not very organized. So it's been very good to get more organized people in. So Tanya's made a big impact. Yeah.
You got organisation on one side and you got instinct on the other, which is good.
My strong point is more on the big picture side of things. I think, maybe I'm fooling myself, but that's.
You seem to be relatively okay at execution as well, mate.
I'm okay with that. But a lot of that just ends up being like a sacrifice of subpar wine,
Yes.
And trying to chisel out what's good and throwing away what's not.
Yeah.
And
then the winery, what's changed over the last 5 years? I mean, every time I go there, there's something different. It's been a sort of an incremental change over a long time.
Yeah. So in 2015, we built the new barrel room, which is just a glorified. It's just a walk-in fridge basically. It's big, but it's big enough for quite a lot of barrels and fooders and everything. And in 2017, we built the outside Blanc and the warehouse. And we haven't changed much since then, except that we've got a very expensive generator now, as of last year, courtesy of my dad helped a lot to sort that, and source that and get it installed at the right time, just before vintage. So the Jenny has been a big thing.
Yes.
But in terms of actual winery infrastructure, not much has changed, and it's starting to feel very snug.
Oh, right, okay.
It's snug.
Have volumes changed since 2018, or not much?
Yeah, we got, 2019, it was, I think, all around, probably still our biggest vintage, because it was just such a great vintage, and everything, there was almost nothing to throw out.
Yeah, right.
So I ended up making a lot of Cartology, probably still our most ever, I think. And it was just a full house of good wines. So that was a great vintage. And I was super stoked to release that in 2020, and then 2020 happened, obviously, and the whole world stopped.
To the echoes of the world.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So we sat on this terrific vintage where it looked like we might actually have that, that financial breakthrough that a small business needs, and then 2020 just dragged along, and eventually we work on an allocation basis with our import network, and even our most robust markets were like, okay, let's just wait and see. So that ended up coming out quite late, and then we had a very, very low yielding 2020 and 21. So then we were, and we're completely dependent on the weather, really, like in a lot of ways. What a dry farm bush vines are really sensitive to rain. So we get dry years like 2020 and 2021. There were some wines we couldn't even release. We just the vineyards almost died in 2020. Ailkrans, for instance, almost copped it in 2020. And yeah, so we had a few touch and go moments there. In 2021, low yielding, and we had we were dealing with a new farm that we were busy putting a lot of capital into, and a vineyard that we were renting in Stellenbosch, which ended up being on the expensive side. So we had a very, very low margin 2021. So from a business point of view, it's actually been quite a tough couple of years, coming off like a great run leading up to buying the farm. Of really good margins and no COVID, no problem. And I'd say since 2020, since that 19 vintage, we've just been, the margins have definitely been lower until the 22 vintage, and then I sorted out a few things that our cost versus our margins weren't quite right. Now they're very healthy again.
Cool.
And 22 was a rainy, as you remember, a rainy season. So we ended up with quite a lot of 22, even though for me it's in terms of vintage quality, it's mediocre at best. It's comparable to 2014 maybe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's happened. And we're at a stage now where we need to do something about warehousing dry goods.
Right.
So space is an issue, but otherwise we're doing very well. The market for the wines is unbelievable. We
Can't make enough.
No, well, we just can't believe that there's such an enthusiasm for them. It's a massive blessing. You because we started quite strong the first few years, and I always kind of assumed that we were going to be one of those sort of fashionable for a decade kind of wineries, and I've tried my best not to follow like what I see as fashion trends in the wine industry, making wine in a specific way, and just stuck to the mantra of just really trying to make like classic high quality wines, hoping that that'll see us through when fashions come and go, and I think that's actually bearing fruit now. Like we're seeing really good secondary market demand for the wines and that kind of thing, which has really surprised me. So
cool.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start? Let's go through the wines. Do you want to start with the first wine?
I think Cartology is probably the most important one to talk about, and then everything kind of goes from Cartology outwards. It's sort of like the center of the spider's web, I suppose, or it's the nexus of the whole thing.
So first vintage, 11?
2011, that's right.
Concept?
Well, it's in the name, the study of maps. Quite a few of the things that we sort of take for granted now in the South African wine industry were quite novel at that time. Like a focus on white wines, for instance, was pretty much unheard of or very rare.
I don't think really started a decade prior, hadn't it, with the FMC?
Yeah, well, there were guys doing really good, like making a huge effort to put Chenin on the map. I remember Teddy Hall was one of the front runners with I think it was Carney back then, and his Rodero wines, and they were pretty staunch wines. But I mean, at the time they were really like breakthrough wines. And Ken, Uncle Ken, was doing a lot with Chenin, and lots of guys. Brevard was up and coming. That's right. And guys really trying to fly the flag. And what was it, 15, 16, I don't know how many years ago now, the Swartland Revolution thing started gaining a lot of momentum. And then obviously Chenin was a big feature. So we came on the scene in end of 2010, early 2011 was our first vintage. And it was kind of difficult for us to define exactly, like we knew what we wanted to do, but the kind of reasons why have become clearer to me over the years, right? So what I can say in terms of definition now is that, which I maybe couldn't define back then, is that we're in a post-cooperative era, right? And we've seen that post-cooperative era playing out, in the shape of businesses like ours and many other startup young businesses where we have quite a low barrier for entry, with grapes being quite affordable, swathes and swathes of dry farmed, relatively mature vineyards. Previously going to cooperatives, sometimes still going to cooperatives, and just a world of opportunity. And I think that's why it's changed so quickly. So with Cartology, we wanted to, basically prove a point about old South African vineyards and South African wine heritage and history. And I've told the story so many times about our travels in Europe, and I won't go into it again.
Well, we've already covered that in the other podcast.
In the other podcast.
Just, go listen to that.
Yeah. So, but what we saw there, which was really paramount, was like this really strong sense of regional identity. You and I both have a soft spot for Northern Italy, for instance. And I mean, regional identity is key. And all of these wonderful spots in Europe, and it did feel like South Africa was toying with having a bit of an identity crisis at the time, with a lot of our top wines kind of being, imitation is probably a cruel word, but based on the other people's ideas, based on Bordeaux or based on
winery specific rather than vineyard specific, or
identity. The identity of some other people's grapes, other people's idea of what's great, other people's.
When you say other people, what do you mean here?
All the Bordelais.
Okay. And other people, as in other producers, or
other regions,
regions,
globally,
okay.
other wine regions. And look, like for instance, the Hemel-en-Aarde Valley. That identity is based on the identity of Burgundy, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, because I mean the Hemel-en-Aarde is making terrific wine, and it has been for a long time. And in a way they're starting to grow their own specific Pinot and Chardonnay, following an identity, but it is still an identity that originates in modern Burgundy, and not even in Old Burgundy, modern Burgundy. So I guess what we were trying to do at the time was say, okay, South Africa actually does have its own identity. It might not be that well known. We have been growing grapes here for quite a long time, since the early 1650s. So like if you think about that period of time, it's 370 something years, okay? Around 3 centuries of that time is in a pre-industrial, pre-nursery era. So if you want to plant a vineyard, you can't just pop down to your neighbor and say, hi Jeff, I'd like to, or pop down to the flipping to Vititech and order some vines. You have to go to your neighbor and say, hi neighbor, I'd like to plant a vineyard, and you'll say, sure. Here are my vines. These ones seem to yield really well. My dad selected these, and you can take some of those, or maybe some that don't get sick or produce or whatever. And then from neighbor to neighbor, father to son, over several generations, over like 3 odd centuries, you're going to get something approximating like a genetic shift, a genetic drift away from the original type. So that's 3 odd centuries of selection Marcel. So we do have our own identity, and that's like a kind of a really foundational idea for our business. And Cartology was the first attempt at showing that okay, South Africa has its own thing, and you can't actually make this wine in another country. So instead of saying, okay, cool, Europe makes amazing wine, which they do, and look at the Loire, these sort of off-dry, very acidic Chenins, with a little botrytis. You can try to do what they're doing, but you're not in the Loire, You've got granite and shale and schist, so you don't have limestone.
Lots of sun and not much water.
Exactly. And it's not really, the Loire's pretty continental, even though it's on the river. Actually, yeah, we really wanted to show that South Africa's got an identity with going for and with trying to express, and Cartology was the first sort of foray into that world, and it was a big success. People really grabbed onto the wine. And
so it's not only about, as I understand it, it's not only about old vine material, but it's also about old vineyards as well.
Yeah, it's about old vineyards. It's about DNA. A lot of the a lot of the old vineyards, or when we say old vineyards planted in the 50s through the 70s, that was kind of the big sort of planting boom for Chenin Blanc.
Yeah, that post-war-ish.
Yeah, and actually a lot of that was to satisfy a demand for Lieberstein, which was a huge bottle product. But that's that aside. Many of those nursery selections are the SN selections. If you go and look, they've all got the prefix SN, which is just a shorthand for Steen. And a lot of that was the old Caviar, selecting material that was pre-existing in the vineyards. So
that's Afrikaans for KWV essentially.
Yeah, KWV. So we have our own selections here. We have our own, even from a clonal point of view, we have our own DNA.
Yeah.
And then we also have really interesting vineyards like the ones in Skurfberg there on Arbeidsend, where Magnetic North comes from.
Which we'll get to.
Yeah, and quite a few of Evans vineyards, which are really like selection Marcel. They just don't know exactly where the material came from. It's definitely not clonal. We see this also in the Semillon. It's just a selection Marcel that's full of genetic variation and really, really interesting.
But just to ask about this, the 3 centuries here, and I know you love history, but you may not be a historian, but I know you're very interested in it. But obviously there was a phylloxera epidemic. Was there not a lot of new material coming into the country after that as well? Is there, or was it all replanted with existing?
I don't know. I'm sure that there was new material coming in.
Yeah.
I know, for instance, that Cinzo was sort of the hot ticket after phylloxera to satisfy the thirst on the gold mines, because it was, and that's also roughly the time that the plantings of Pontac dramatically sort of vanished, because it was a difficult grape to farm in terms of yield. It was tricky.
Yeah.
Cinzo from
Semillon went down as well, and Chenin went up.
Semillon I believe was already vanishing, but Sem was also massive. That being said, we still have, if you're going through a phase of getting in American rootstock and replanting vineyards with American rootstock and field grafting material onto that, you can field graft existing DNA onto new rootstocks without a problem.
Yes.
For instance, the old Hanepoort vineyard that we can look at later. I've dated that based on the rootstock that's used, rather than the family history. But it's still from that pretty old DNA with the oval-shaped berry. Yeah, thank you. It's very nice. Appreciate it.
To keep you lubricated.
Yeah. Thanks. Anyway, so basically the idea of Cartology was it means the study of maps or charts, and it was, we've said it on the back label. It's sort of a snapshot of the Cape in a given vintage. as things stand now, it's still based largely on the original cachet of vineyards that we had at that time. Over the years, I've experimented with lots of other blocks, and I've settled on approximately 9 old parcels of Chenin, between around 40 and 60 years old. They're all dry farm, they're all bush vines, different parts of the Cape, different soils. So everything from the far north on the red sand over red clay in the Skurfberg area. We've got also a block now in Pekingese Kloof that I like. A block close to Cape Town on heavy shale. We've got blocks on the Paardeberg on granite, blocks on the Valsberg coast of Stellenbosch on granite. So there's quite a few different, and also of course the Bottler Hills on shale. So we've got quite a few different sort of faces of top South African Chenin.
But all pretty much coastal region.
Yes.
Yeah.
Coastal region, I suppose.
The older areas essentially. Yeah.
The older areas of farming. And then we've got, of course, the one old Semillon vineyard in there, which is, there for a couple of reasons.
Talk to me about the
decision making.
or the inspiration, or the decision, or how did that? Because it wasn't blending Semillon into Chenin. Now, thanks to like in massive part of this wine, is an accepted, well, maybe not norm, but it's an accepted practice. It wasn't back in 2010, 2011.
No, we weren't thinking of it in so much in terms of trying to create like a regional thing, or again, like we just wanted to know like what is, and Palomino was on the table as well, as a potential grape because of its history in the Cape. Well, I've circled with Palomino. I've made 1 or 2, and they've never really kind of done anywhere near what the Chenin or the Semillon have done. But at that time,
it brings different quality. Yeah.
The Semillon vineyard was sort of following me around because friends knew that I was looking for old vines. Rosa was obviously doing unbelievable work at that time in the employ of the Rupert family, trying to catalogue the old vineyards of the Cape, and we were in regular touch with her at that time also. And we'd done quite a bit of our own homework and found some pretty special spots, including what became Radio Lazarus, and then this La Colline vineyard. The Semillon was just, I heard from a bunch of people like in the same 10-day period. 3 different people told me about this vineyard, and I thought, okay, cool.
That's interesting, isn't it?
I need to go. Yeah, I thought so. I need to go and have a look. And so we actually worked with that La Colline vineyard, which is now called Monument Semillon, from the first year. And anyway, but I was looking for Sem, and that vineyard sort of found us. But at back in 2010, I was working as a wine steward at La Colombe, a restaurant when they were still on Constantia Eitzig, and part of your duty is you have to check the bottles, buy the glass bottles before you close up shop. I know I've told you this before, but just for the sake of the audience, I was checking the Beaumont Haute Marguerite, which is one of the great Chenins in the Cape, and the Buchanod Semillon. I was just checking them, and I had a little bit of Semillon left in my glass, and I picked up the Haute Marguerite and I looked at the glass and I was like, oh, okay. I'll just put a little bit in there and see what happens, and I loved it. I thought it was really.
No one arrested you?
No one arrested me. There were no blue lights flashing.
The police were not called.
And I just loved what it did for the palate of the wine. I thought it just, Chenin, it can be really like energetic, nice attack, can finish quite long. But for me, like in my mind, Sem is generally speaking, it's kind of like a big leather couch. It's comfortable and it's deep and it's sort of, I don't know, it's difficult to articulate nicely. It just lends depth to the palate.
Yes.
And I love the historical edition. Something like it's got so much history in the Cape.
So the percentages haven't changed that much.
They sort of vary between around 8 and around 14, depending on the.
Yeah, but it's not a massive.
No, it's not a big contribution. It's because it's only one Sem vineyard out of about 10 vineyards that make.
I was going to ask you, is it because of the sources limited by source rather than you think that's going to be the best?
Look, I do have enough Sem sometimes to make it like 15% Sem if I wanted, but generally speaking, the wine sort of, depending on the vintage, works at different quantities.
Okay. Yeah. And winemaking over the last 5 years? I mean, we did.
Everything's still the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a bit dogmatic about that. And
I mean, you've gone into bigger formats, I know.
Yes. Okay. So that's true. I have been actively buying foederers and cement vessels. Mm-hmm. So cement eggs, I've got about 7 of those now, and I think I've got 6 of those. They call them diamonds. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a cheesy name.
Yes.
They look like diamonds. So,
yes.
There's a 2,000-litre cement foeder, basically.
They're 12-sided, I don't think they.
I don't know. I've never counted, but they have many sides.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Vessel of many sides. Yeah. And Stompy used them a lot, and I chatted to him. He loves them, and I tried them out. They come in through Fritz, through.
Because you guys make really similar wines, so.
We have some different ideas about things, yeah. But they really work for him, and I love them. If I could fit more into the winery, I'd probably buy more of them.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I think they're an Italian product. It's CLC Vasha that makes them.
Yeah.
So yes, we have gone on to larger format stuff, and I also have found progressively, and the reason is a mystery. I don't know why, but the early pick granite stuff really likes cement. I don't know why.
Why is large format? What's your sort of deriving force? Is it?
I don't know.
Is it lack of reliable acidity from Mother Nature, or freshness? Or?
Yeah. So because we don't acidify wines, it is nice to kind of try to capture a little bit of crunch or freshness in the wines. 2018 was the last time we spoke, so there is another thing that's changed, but we can touch that in a second. In terms of our élevage, the aging of the wines before bottling.
We can touch throughout. It's fine.
Okay, thank you. You can cut that off.
Leave it in.
Don't touch me. But we.
Why are you blushing, mate?
They definitely maintain a bit of sort of freshness and crunch in the wines, and I do always, on our own farm on the Paardeberg, and also on another granite farm on the south coast of Stellenbosch, Peter Bredal's farm. We usually have some early picked stuff from there, and I love to put that into cement. It goes into this weird lime feinbush thing that I don't find with the same wine in a barrel.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know why. It's a mystery.
Yeah.
But the winemaking philosophy hasn't moved at all. It's still the same thing. It's just it's sorting, whole bunch pressing.
Just fine-tuned it.
Yeah, no sulfur.
Continue to fine-tune it.
Yeah, we probably rack a little bit cleaner than we did a few years ago. I would like to rack really dirty and have a lot of tannin in the white wines. I still like that, but maybe a bit more careful with that. And that's what I do, because I want to have even out the playing field completely. So factor out winemaking. So if all the vineyards are made exactly the same way, pretty much, then hopefully you're going to see the vineyard differences in the winery.
Cool.
So on the élevage, look, my winemaking, that's what we've always done. And the wines can be a bit subtle on the nose sometimes, and normally have quite good texture on the palate. But I had a meeting with the new guy from Tiduk the other day, and he brought some tank samples of wines that he'd made, and I'd made some wine for Tiduk, and he'd done things a bit more conventionally with sulfur at the crusher and blocking mallow and the kind of thing that we never do. And I was so impressed with his wines. I mean, I thought they were really, really, really bright and lively, and had unbelievable aromatics. And I just started to think to myself, am I doing the right thing?
I'm missing a trick here. Yeah.
But it's important to be self-critical, I think. So I'm still going to stick with what we do, because it's very hands-off, and it's super dependent on the quality of the vineyard, and I like that idea.
Seems to be working as well.
People do seem to like the wines.
People are pretty happy.
Well, I mean, if I wanted more aromatics, I could probably apply a bit more conventional winemaking. But yeah, so anyway, that's what we do. The other thing that we changed, I was talking about, was élevage.
Yes.
So, and this came on largely because of the fooders, and because of talking to Chris and Andrea Molyneux, who I really admire. I think they make terrific wine, and also doing it on a bigger scale now, and their just execution is off the charts. They're very good. So they like to, well, this was years ago, I don't know if they still do it, but they like to age their Syrah, post barrel in tank for a while, for like half a year or so, I think, at that time. I'm trying to remember the conversation. And he said it just makes a huge difference to the wines. And that was in my mind. And then the fooders, right? So fooders are fussy things. They don't like to be empty. If they're empty for more than 10 days, even if you steam them and clean them and do the whole thing, they do tend to want to get moldy.
Just to shift a bit and get moldy, okay.
Get friggin' moldy, bro, and then you've got to send an intern in there and scrub them and clean them out again, and it's just a waste of time and resources. So trying to keep the fooders full until the very last moment before the grapes arrive in the winery, before you do the steaming.
Yes.
That's another factor. So I had this, thing with Molyneux in my head, and the fact that the fooders really don't want to be empty for a month at a time before, between vintages. So now I've bought a whole series of steel tanks of different sizes, and I use those to make up the cuvées. And then, so we'll do the blending in Jan, like a week before the grapes hit.
Okay.
Yeah, and make up all that vintage's wines. So that's coming for me now after holidays.
Yes.
Hopefully I've caught a couple of fish and I feel good about life, and then I'm going to get back in the winery and blend some wines, and blend up the 23s, which actually look quite nice.
Okay. Cool.
And then those go into steel tanks for 5 to 6 months. Okay. So it's 12 months on gross lees, and then 5 to 6 months on fine lees before bottling, and we bottle in the winter.
Okay.
And then, because we're still a relatively small wine business and hope to stay that way, we do need to release the wines quite shortly after bottling, so they can be a bit severe in the first few months. Normally up until that first summer, like November,
So
December.
in an ideal world, when would you?
The next year.
Yeah, okay. So just an extra year.
Yeah, it would be so good to have.
Bottle age, or would you like to do
bottle age?
elevage?
Bottle age. It would be so nice to have, not elevage. I think the wines would tire out a bit. So,
Okay.
so 12 months on gross lees, around 6 months on fine lees, and then a year in bottle. That'd be the dream.
Yeah.
You know. But
maybe one day.
Well, I mean, we'd go bankrupt if we tried to do that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was chatting to Craig Hawkins, who's just released the first wine from his vineyard, which is a 2021. And he's usually releasing.
Yeah, really early.
He's releasing with that the rest of his 23s.
Wow.
So it's a really interesting.
What's the wine like?
Really good. Yeah. I mean.
Have you seen the soils?
Yeah. I've been up there many times.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think that was a very clever purchase.
In terms of, because you don't sort of equate him with a later release.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting.
Yeah, his wines are like it's almost like a grocery. It's like,
yes, yeah.
It's like fresh wine that you want to drink, you want to braai, you want to drink the wine now. It's vibrant.
Yeah, super interesting.
Okay, I'd love to try that.
Yeah.
What is in there? It's
Grenache Blanc.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
Hawkins.
It's the Cortez of Grenache Blancs.
Okay. I haven't talked to Craig in years. I've got to reconnect.
But is it something maybe you would do with one of the another cuvee? Like obviously you couldn't do it with the whole production of Alheit wines.
Yeah.
And maybe or not.
I think philosophically we kind of we synced into vintage by vintage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the way we do it, like vineyard by vineyard and vintage by vintage. I think it would not make sense for us to have a winemaking difference.
Cool.
If you know what I mean. Yeah.
Alcohol, picking dates, RS on Cartology has,
the
first few vintages shifted around, but it seems pretty consistent the last sort of...
Yeah, good question.
10 or so?
That first Cartology had like 3 grams of RS, which always bothered me.
Okay. So you were not happy?
I didn't actually. The 2011 that everyone went nuts for, I thought it was good, but I liked the 2012 more. The 2012 was a bit more earthy and a bit more grungy, but... I mean, the 2011 was the one with the crowd pleaser with the big nose and everything like that. And I'm stoked that the wine did well and helped to make a name for us, And I've had a bottle recently. It's really in good shape. But we kind of knew what we wanted to make. And I felt like, personally, we kind of, like the 2011 wine was a bit too big. 2012 I was happy with. 13s were way too big. 14s were pretty good again. 15s were too big. 16s were good. And then from 17 on, I feel like really confident about every vintage. And that's just a learning process. You get to know how the vineyards perform. You can read the canopy versus the crop ratio. It's almost like an engine pulling a trailer up a road, up a hill. If you've got a massive canopy and a small crop, this is a big engine pulling a small trailer. It's going to go fast. And vice versa. So, just learning and trying to get better at it. And just becoming more familiar with the vineyards. And also, like, less vineyards. We, at one stage, I think in 2018, 19, we just had a ton of vineyards that we were dealing with.
Okay.
I think more than 20. And we've culled that down to probably around a dozen producers that we work with and that we really trust. And, also like when we bought the farm, that also changed a lot. Like we had other Paardeberg producers that we worked with. We had some granite, Stellenbosch stuff that also didn't make sense anymore because we had a lot of granite wine. The soil makes a huge difference. So we lost a few producers then, but now we've got like a cachet of producers that of growers that we're working with and vineyards that I know and understand, that I think are a really, really, really good selection of parcels. So,
cool.
So that's, I guess, what's the right word? Rationalized a little bit, and winemaking. I'm normally pretty happy when the wines are between 13 and 13.5 alcohol.
Okay.
I find that as sort of a sweet spot. Some vineyards, especially the Skurfberg stuff, that
north,
do really well a little higher.
Yes.
Although we haven't had a 14 alcohol ale krantz in a while, but they really are normally pretty great at that. And then the other one that does well with some ripeness is Hemel-en-Aarde, actually, because it's just got massive acid.
Yeah.
So it does pretty well with nice ripe flavors. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Shall we move on?
Please. Yeah.
Okay. What's next, do you reckon?
Well, okay, so that was Cartology, and then so that's kind of the main thing, and then all the single vineyard wines sort of came out of working with those vineyards and learning like what's what and seeing patterns and thinking, okay, this would be really good on its own.
And there's one that you've made that isn't here, that's no longer made. Maybe should we quickly address that?
Radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, radio was...
we'll get a bottle shot or put it in here.
Radio. Yeah, that was our first single vineyard wine. That was a vineyard that I found Also at a time when, I had a degree in viticulture, but I just had no practical viticultural experience outside of working in the Mosel River and a few other places in the world in very different conditions, So I think if I'd found that vineyard now, I would have done better with it.
Okay.
But I threw everything at it. We got a good contractor in to help us with the work. We mulched, we freaking composted, we did everything that we knew how to do.
Where was the vineyard?
It was on top of one of the Bottleray hills. It was literally like a little, a little blanket lying on top of the Bottleray hills. It was mostly shale, but there was quite a few parts of the vineyard where there was granite coming through. Okay. So it was really interesting.
So quite, obviously at the top of the hill, quite exposed site? Or?
Yeah, it was a little windy. The yields were...
a little windy?
Yes, you came up there with me, right?
Yes,
Remember?
Yeah.
The yields were abysmal, really bad. And 2017 was the last time we could actually make a wine out of that. We tried in 2018, and we also had a twin vineyard on top of the neighboring hill that we were working with to try to make a bit more Radio Lazarus, because they were virtually, they were the same thing, kind of almost. And that gave no grapes in 2018, like nothing. And then our original vineyard gave one demijohn.
So, what was it? What was the issue?
Traits, I think.
With hindsight?
Drought
Okay.
was a massive problem. Look, when we found the vineyard, it was not in good shape.
Yes. Part of the Lazarus reference.
Yeah. It was really it wasn't. I don't think it was commercially viable for the owner of the land. I don't think they'd been doing much with it. I think they were trying to get, because it looked like a herd of porcupines. Right. It was just shoots, and we needed to do some pretty severe remedial pruning and suckering and everything like that. And there were times there where 15 and 16 where the vineyard actually looked pretty good. And then that 15 and 16 were quite hot and dry, and you could see the vineyard struggling. 17 was a bit better, and then by 18 it just got slammed. 18 was dry. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
And another thing that happened was that there was just no food in the veld for the wildlife, and there's a lot of wildlife up there. We had unbelievable buck damage. Almost all of our shoots were eaten back by buck. Right. So the vineyard just basically completely kaput after 2018. So we just left it, and I drove up there a couple of years ago just to see what it looked like, and there's nothing going on up there. So
are the vines still there, or?
When I drove up there, I don't know what's going on there now. Yeah. There were vines, but they'd cut them back. The owners of that land are wonderful people, and I don't know if they had their own cellar. But the top part of the farm, above about 300 meters above sea level, just the logistics of farming up there and the cost of farming up there, I think that sort of left that idea.
Okay. Just rationalise that away.
And then I don't know if they own the land currently. I understand it was for sale a while ago. Yeah. Anyway. Before
we move on, I want to tell you that Radio Lazarus 2012 was possibly, if not the greatest South African white wine I've ever had. By the way, it's a phenomenal wine, and I had it as a mature wine.
Appreciate it.
I had it, I think, in 2020 or even 2021.
Thank you.
And it just blew me away.
Unbelievable. That was a special wine for us because it was picked on the 6th of March. It was the last vineyard we picked that year, and that was quite a late pick, and I was just waiting for it to ripen, and it was going quite slow. And came back to the winery. We put it in the reefer, and then sorted it the next day and pressed it. And then Suzaan went into labour with Elisabeth, with our first child.
Nice.
And then she arrived early on the 8th of March. And then I remembered, once she was out and everybody was happy and safe and had something to drink and all of that, then I drove back up to the winery and cleaned out the press.
Right. Yeah.
So that wine is precisely as old as my daughter.
Yeah.
And it always was a nice wine, but like one of the examples of that wine was it's one of the wines with the lowest TA that we've ever bottled, but it always felt really fresh. And really
it was unbelievable.
It actually had a TA of 4.9.
Yeah, crazy. Whatever it was.
That still freaks me out. It freaked me out at the time, and it freaks me out now because normally we don't like to bottle anything under about 5.5 TA.
And that's when you were selling them as 6-packs, so I think I've still got 5 left.
Okay. I haven't actually tasted one of those in quite a while. Hans opened one for me a few years ago.
I'll have to find one and we can open one.
Well, that was still when we were using punch corks, and that's another thing that's changed since the last time we talked.
Yes.
We've moved from punch corks over to diams. So it's you never know what you're going to get. But we did wax all our bottles then, and that actually does, I think, make quite a big difference.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it seals them nicely. I hope so.
We hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So radio, okay, and the next wine we can talk about. It's not a single vineyard wine. It's here after here.
Okay.
So that's kind of a new thing. That was our first vintage of that wine was in.
They're going from the oldest to the youngest.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I love to, when we do tastings at the winery, to taste those two wines next to each other.
Okay.
Because even though the ripeness is pretty similar, there is a significant difference on the palate. The old vines have just got a little gravity that doesn't seem to be present on the young vines. But
so this is a young vines wine, essentially.
Yeah. So look,
what do you classify as young and old? Do you go through the?
Yeah, it's tricky. We'll get to that, but so
the intensity of the flavors.
So I kind of realized in the 2022 vintage that we had a hugely productive 22, more than we expected, and as I said, like we even on Neverdam we got almost 3 tons a hectare, so we had more wine than we knew what to do with, and I had to be like extremely careful in the selection process for the wines. We culled a great deal of wine. In the process of making up what I thought was a very good representative Cartology, there were some older vineyards that were like near as damn, So I was like, ooh, what do we do with this, So there may or may not be quite a bit of old vineyard wine in my young vineyard wine. I didn't think anybody would mind.
Yeah.
I thought if I did it the other way around, then that wouldn't be right, ethically speaking. But no one's going to moan if they're buying a young vineyard wine and there's a few old vines in there.
You wouldn't think so, would you?
You wouldn't. So basically, it was created in 2020 because we were planting vines on Neverdam, and we're in the process of getting vines planted on Odam up in Skurfberg as well. And we've got a few other growers that have got really terrific young Chenin vineyards, like Dani Kirinis. He's got that dry farmed.
The most beautiful man in Stellenbosch.
Yeah, with the sharp nose. Love that guy.
Dani.
He says he's got a scab near soos 'n reusie snik. Anyway, yeah, brilliant guy. And he's got a really good young vineyard, and we were making some for him, and it was so good. So I thought, okay, cool. This wine can exist to accommodate the young vines that we're busy planting with our growers in the areas that we control, and it can also act as almost like a nursery for vineyards that are not quite old enough but seem like they've got a lot of potential to maybe make it into Cartology one day. Okay. So like a nursery for Cartology.
How is this project different to the Flotsam and Jetsam project that you had for a while?
Yeah, Flotsam, yes, like that thing was a good case of the tail starting to wag the dog. It was too successful for its own good, and it's quite different. I mean, Flotsam didn't have any young vineyards in it. Okay. It was a few different.
It was just all the declassified stuff that didn't go into Cartology, essentially.
There was some declassified Cartology stuff, and it was super useful for that. Yeah. And there were vineyards that were specifically for Flotsam. Okay. Yeah, that were like higher yielding sites that I thought were pretty good. And like the one day, I think it was in 2017 or 18, I was picking a vineyard. And it was harvest is hectic, and I was just thinking, like, what the hell am I doing? What am I doing? Like this is like 100 miles away.
Do you often find yourself in those conditions in harvest, mate?
Sometimes we're like, well, what am I doing? What's the thinking behind this? And trying to be self-critical and like.
I don't know what the why is.
Yeah, the why is the main question. Why are we engaged in this? And the wine was doing really well. At one stage, we were making as much Flotsam and Jetsam as we were making Alheit Vineyards wines, and then I started to get frightened. And had a meeting with Suzaan, and she just said, like, why? This is like 100 miles away from our original intention with Cartology and with the single vineyards, which was like genuinely, whether we've achieved it or not, was to really try to make the best white wines in the Cape. That was our sole mission. That's what we wanted to do. I think in some years we've gotten close, but this was more like it was a commercial venture, and I was worried that we were going to end up, fighting for space on a supermarket shelf and worrying about, fractions of a percentage margins and stuff like that. And I just didn't want to play that game. I'm just not smart enough to do it. Firstly, and the guys that are good at that,
your logistics wasn't exactly set up for that sort of thing.
No, all those grapes that get trucked in from bloody over the mountain, and it's one press that we're working with, and it just multiplies the work and takes your eye off the ball of the main thing. So no.
So volumes are much smaller for this.
No, so they were, they started off smaller.
Perfect, mate.
But they started off smaller in 2020, and then they grew a little in 21, and then, as I said, and then they'll shrink again now. But 2022 presented me with a unique problem. It was like, okay, I've got all this wine. I know what I'm going to cull completely away, because we actually have an anonymous-ish second label already. Yes. That helps us a great deal with maintaining the level for Cartology. And that goes to the UK to a good business relationship over there, good friends. But then this started as a project to catch the young vines.
Yes.
But now when I say young, it's like anything from newly planted to, not that far from 40 years old.
Yeah.
Is my young vine stuff. Yeah.
So anything younger than you is young vines, is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. And as I get older,
more and more.
Yeah, there goes the threshold. But good point.
Well, anything older than you is older. Maybe I should put it that way. That's probably the better way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah. So in 22 we managed to make quite a bit of it, and that's actually, I'm really proud of that wine. 23 again, it just wasn't as crazy a vintage, so there'll probably be less of it.
So I'm not that interested in vintages for this chat though. I just want more about the philosophy, and so that there's a significant separation between this and
Cartology
and
Flotsam
as well, and
so.
Cartology obviously as well.
No, definitely, they have different purposes.
Are you chasing? Sorry to interrupt. Are you chasing young vineyards of Semillon like you were?
No.
No. Why not?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question. I've never really thought about it. I think off the cuff, probably the quickest answer is that I'm trying to think of people that have made cuttings from the old, because the DNA is so different. That's the main thing. From the old Sem, I think Jasper and Francisca on Waterfall. I think John works with that. They've made
it's the paper kite and the tin
exactly.
soldier. But they made cuttings of the
of the really interesting old stuff.
Yeah.
In their case, the gris.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you walk through that La Colline vineyard in harvest time, there's a lot going on there. It's not just like gris and Blanc. It's like gris and rose, and then like a golden like doré, and then there's green, like really green.
A couple of muskets maybe.
I think it's like there's all. I mean, just within the Sem, of course, there's a few Semillon and friends. But just within the Sem, it's a lot more than just gris and Blanc. I think. Yeah. Personally, I could be wrong. But no, so until we kind of make selections of those, and I think I know that Rissa did a lot of work with I think the guys from Entav came out in 2019, was it? I don't want to get the facts all mixed up, but basically selections have been taken from the old Skurfberg stuff, and I wonder if Henk-Lang Semillon isn't a part of that, possibly. Henk Naaskalk Willem Lang, they've got wonderful old Semillon on their farm, and there might be really interesting Semillon selections to work with in the future that are from the old DNA of the Cape.
Yeah.
Because the young stuff and the young selections are really grassy and kind of a bit more like Sauvignon than the old stuff.
But I think that illustrates the point that you're not just interested in making great wine, you're interested in making great wine that is representative of
the Cape.
Of the Cape, essentially.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
That is really the plan.
Yeah.
Hence the current lack of reds, because
yes.
From and I don't know how sharp or how accurate our old literature is. There's a lady that you probably should talk to at some stage called Joanne Gibson. She's written some terrific articles that I've enjoyed so much.
Yeah, she likes writing. She doesn't like talking that much.
Okay, well you have to give her some wine and get her to talk a little bit. And she wrote some great stuff on Pontac and is trying to dig through the old literature. Tim James obviously is another guy that's really interested in that topic, and he's also a great writer, and he will talk.
I bring some Riesling for Tim. He'll talk.
He'll talk. So maybe explore the history of the Cape, because we're working on things that these people have written, on those ideas. I haven't gone to the old manuscripts myself and tried to find out.
You're trusting their...
I'm trusting what they've said. And I believe most of it is right. So from a red grape point of view, we have a bit of a paucity in the very, very early years, with the exception of Pontac, obviously. Yeah. So that's year after year.
Should we touch on why there's not a lot of old red vineyards around?
We could touch on it, but I just wouldn't be able to give you a truthful answer because I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
something to do with leaf roll?
Could be leaf roll, but I don't know. I mean, leaf roll is a big problem in late ripening reds. It's much less of an issue in early ripening reds. We have quite a bit of leaf roll in some of our white wine vineyards.
But they're not as affected.
Yeah, but they're just. I mean, some grape varieties also are just less sensitive. They ripen early. It doesn't really affect the phenolic development of the wine. But with Cabernet,
it has to get ripped out. And Syrah as well? Or, Syrah's
I would think so. Syrah's got its own issues.
Yeah.
Okay. When I think of leaf roll on the Cape, I think of like late reds.
Well, in our next chat in 5 years' time, we can talk about that more as your red project develops and matures.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it.
Okay. What's next?
We can talk about it Fire by Night, maybe.
Okay.
That's our own farm. And that's normally the first single vineyard wine that I serve when we have like a tasting. I'll serve that first.
So this is Paterberg Chenin.
That's pure Nieuwedam.
Yeah.
The label was actually created to catch some of the really good Paterberg vines that we had. We worked a bit with Langkloof and with Graham Villas and stuff just up from us.
Okay.
Really nice vineyards. And then I wanted to have like a Paardeberg wine. And like pay tribute to the mountain, because that mountain has just had a huge impact on the modern history of Cape wine and the characters that live there, and that's part of the reason.
It's now its own WO now, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But then as we kind of got to the process at the end of 2017 of choosing which parcels are going to go into Fire by Night, it was pretty much all Nivedam. Those are my favourites, and it strengthened the desire to want to buy that farm, which then you achieved in 2019.
So you had made and released this wine prior to the farm purchase.
Prior to okay. And also then made sense to buy the farm because we already had a line within which to sell pure Paardeberg Chenin, so much of that farm was going into Cartology already.
Right. So how much of the farm
normally around between 20 and 30% of Cartology will be from Nivedam.
Okay. And then how much of Fire by Night is out of
the total? I haven't actually gone and worked it out.
Plus minus, like a ballpark?
A good vintage for us will be between 5,000 and 6,000 bottles of Fire by Night.
Okay.
So I don't know how many tons that is. Some tons of grapes.
Yeah. 8-ish.
So let's say about a quarter of the production, probably not even a quarter to a fifth of the production will go into a single origin wine.
Yep.
And the majority of the balance will go into Cartology, and not even every year. Some years I'm very strict with it, and I think in 22, in fact, some of it ended up in here after year. Some of the younger stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But just on a quick note, so these are probably out of focus, but you can see these have got colourful capsules.
Yes.
Right, and all the single vineyard wines have got black capsules.
Right.
So that's sort of just a small internal code in the business. So colourful capsule equals more than one place.
A blend of vineyards.
So multi-regional or a few places,
yes.
and then black capsule is one place.
There you go.
Yeah, just so you know. So Fire by Night's pure granite soils. Nivedam, the vineyards there are planted between 1971 and 1985. Was it 1974? There was some. Crystal always used to say 1971, but the official service record says 1974. But there was some question around the accuracy of the records.
Yeah,
as there sometimes are.
Well, they changed the system in 1974, so I think a lot of vineyards got registered that because they changed the whole system then.
All right. Well, whatever it may be, it's somewhere between basically 50 odd years old and 40 odd years old. That's kind of the span of ages of the vines. And it's a pretty great place. It's got a very, very particular personality, the wine.
When we talk about Paardeberg Chenin, what does it mean to you? What does it, if you say, if you're talking about Paardeberg Chenin and its attributes?
Yes.
Maybe describe for those people who can't taste and smell the wine.
Hello, people who can't smell and taste the wine.
Through the internet.
Yes, interweb. Oh, I wonder how far off that is.
Yeah.
But smell-o-vision.
What does it bring? Yeah.
Is that a real thing?
Yeah.
So Paardeberg, the way that we make the Paardeberg stuff is I definitely lean towards earlier pickings. Normally the wine that we release from there is between 12.5 and a shade over 13, depending on the vintage.
Yep.
Different to Southern Stellenbosch, which will be at least 13, otherwise the wine isn't there.
Okay.
Yeah. Where the Paardeberg stuff seems to really shine when it's picked relatively early. Also, acidity can be an issue on the Paardeberg.
Okay.
Yeah. At least on our sites, I can't speak for everybody.
Yeah.
So I really like the stuff that we pick quite early, and I'm also gravitating towards larger format.
As you said before,
cement eggs. So this wine will normally be around half cement eggs and around half large foudre. Yeah.
And what's the picking window here?
We're looking at picking between like 20.5 and 21.5.
In time-wise, do you have it? Is it like you miss it by 3 days, you're fucked, or do you
pretty
have
much, brew. And Skurfberg is the same, and most of the Swartland vineyards we have, including another one that we have for Cartology, which is on red soils, close to Malmesbury, really good vineyard. You don't have a lot of time, so 2-3 days if you really want to nail it.
Yeah. So when are you going out there every day, or getting?
I'm out there.
Sampling
I'm either out there
every
almost every day, or I'm sending an intern out almost every day.
Yeah.
So I'm tracking the vineyards pretty closely.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in that's my main thing in harvest time. There's only 2 things I need to get right in harvest time, because all the other work is done, right?
Yes.
So harvest time, my most important call is picking date for that vineyard. And that can be affected by like an impending rain event sometimes, or but it's
a looming Sunday when no one wants to work.
So picking day is important. That's actually paramount, and then pressing.
Yeah.
So I like to be at the press and make the call on cutting the press. So those are 2 really, really critical. That's actually like the only real value add that I can like actually do as a winemaker within our framework of how we like to work. Everything else is, the racking doesn't take a rocket scientist. The fermentation happens on its own.
Yeah, and then the two judgment calls.
Those are the two major judgment calls that sort of put my thumbprint, I guess, if I have to admit that there is a winemaker's thumbprint on the wines, then that's where it comes in. So for me, Paardeberg is better, a little greener.
Okay.
And that's where you get, like, especially you see it in the eggs, you get that like lovely kind of green citrus, I guess almost touching into lime, and then there's like a thatch roof, like new thatch roof kind of smell that comes out of the Paardeberg wines, which is kind of a giveaway for me. But interesting fact,
that's not a hay bale sort of vibe,
no,
is it?
it's not quite like into that like heavy like straw, wet straw thing you can get in Loire Chenin, but it's probably in the same world.
Yes.
But it's kind of a fresh thatch.
Yeah.
And the hills there,
a bit like reedier, essentially.
maybe. Yeah, the hills there are covered with this kapokbos, which is like a wild rosemary, basically.
Okay.
And it's pretty aromatic, and I wonder sometimes if it's not maybe if there's some, if there's maybe a little bit of wild rosemary influence in the wine.
Bit of transfer of
eucalyptol.
eucalyptol.
John Seckham bought me a book once called Postmodern Winemaking,
Right.
which is this really clever guy. But it's basically his treatise, kind of like defending his winemaking that he does. A lot of which is really like technological, and I'm obviously not a fan of that type of winemaking. But it was still a very interesting read, and he's a very smart guy. And he says the most interesting tasting that he ever did was a water tasting. So there's this machine. I still don't even know how it works, but it bloody makes wine in like 24 hours. This flash machine. And part of what comes out of the process is like a water fraction.
Okay.
And he tasted water fractions, one from, he said that smelled like amaretto, and the vineyard was next to a walnut grove. He said one that smelled like cow shit. You can beep that part for the kiddies watching, which was next to a feedlot.
I think I've already dropped a couple of F-bombs. So I think
well, you're Australian. It's not your fault, man. It's your home language.
Word we learn.
What are the first three?
They're the bad ones.
Yeah. Barbie.
Now.
So, and you get the idea. And then one he said that smelled like diesel exhaust, and that vineyard was just off Highway 29.
Right.
So I just thought, wow, that's super interesting, and I wonder how much of that, like the smell of the area, has an effect on the wine itself. Just through like being there.
Yes.
I don't know. It sounds a little bit odd, but
yeah. I mean, obviously, grapevines have leaves and they're big solar panels, and that's where a lot of the
something
stuff,
going on there. But point is, Paardeberg for me, the wine, I like the wines to be quite linear, and in that sort of green citrus thatch roof sort of world.
Yeah.
And they can be quite pithy.
Right.
And I like that a lot.
And I mean, the texture-wise, what are you doing in the winery to preserve that or accentuate that, or?
Well, with the Chenins in particular, which is most of our production, we do quite dirty rackings. So we'll whole bunch press everything, and then so the grapes are picked, and then they go into a fridge truck, and we don't cool them below like 12 degrees C, because I'm trying to imitate a cold night, because that I don't want to scare the crap out of the microflora on the grapes, because that's like our main engine for actually getting wine.
Yes.
And you have a unique set of microflora pretty much for every site. That's another reason why we make a huge effort to separate out these, kind of look at a vineyard as almost like a microbial culture coming into the winery. So if we're pressing Swartland on the Tuesday and Stellenbosch on the Wednesday, then like everything gets cleaned.
Yes.
Everything that's going to touch grape juice gets cleaned. So you can work like the way we work, which is really hands off, but you have to be careful and clean if you're going to do it like that. So we try to separate out the microbial cultures as much as we can. Anyway, so 12 degrees C grapes, sorted, pressed into a tank. Then that tank just sits there. There's no gas cover or sulfur or whatever.
So a whole bunch pressing?
Yeah, still like that. And then I make the call on the press cut. And then that tank, the next morning, one of the interns or one of the cellar workers will rack it into a neighboring tank, basically just to homogenize the juice. Otherwise it's stratified, and if you fill directly, you're going to end up with some barrels that have got no solids and some have got all the solids. So we try to have like and already by then the juice is like brown. And then we just leave the very, very heavy stuff on the bottom. And depending on how much texture or how much tannin I want in the wine, I can take more or less of that.
Okay.
Yeah. And like how do the skins look, how do the skins taste? Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So that's also, I suppose, a decision-making moment. And then that goes into barrel.
So if this is a pithy, brings a pithy element to it, usually less of the real heavy lees?
I don't know. It just seems to be a natural thing that happens on the Paardeberg.
Yeah.
You know, I don't recall like purposefully taking more lees for this, but maybe it's the fact that quite a bit of it is in cement eggs these days, and that does seem to build like the fabric or the textural element of the wine quite a bit, just by way of that bloody amazing natural phenomenon that does actually happen that I was a bit of a skeptic of, but it does. I've seen it, of keeping lees in suspension for longer parts of the year than other vessels manage to do. So that could be a part of it, but also like the Paardeberg berries generally tend to be really, really small.
Yes.
So in that time period between flowering and veraison, when cell division is happening in the pericarp, there's just not that much soil water available. So you end up with really, really small berries. And there's this other thing that Etienne told me about, and I've never read a paper on it, so I'm just going on what Etienne's told me. But it's the production in the root tips of abscisic acid during partial root zone drying and the ripening, and that's been so positively correlated with quality in studies. I think in Australia actually, in the AWRI, that they actually try to mimic that in irrigated vineyards now. Yeah, right. To have partial root zone drying towards the. Are
you talking about a specific quality or quality as
just quality? Just like this is good wine. Yeah, this is good wine. This isn't good wine.
Yeah.
So I think that's also one of the secrets of dry farmed vineyards in the right soil.
Yeah.
They get that gradual partial root zone drying during the maturation period of the grapes. Anyway, so these wines tend to be quite pithy, and I like them to be quite linear. You always get questions from sommeliers, and you're one of them. Like, oh, what would you pair this with, or what would you? I know you don't do that. I never know what to say. I'm like, I don't know. Just open the bottle.
It's like asking the sommelier how they should make the wine. It's like, ask the right person the right question.
Exactly. Like, you pair the wine with what you want to
Exactly.
do. I don't pair wines, but I just open it when I'm making a fire and getting ready to braai some chops. I'll drink a bottle of wine, and for me, this is like a really hot day wine.
Right. Yeah, it's quite refreshing.
Yeah, bro.
It's almost like a laser beam.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah. It should be like.
So it's not
kind of makes you salivate.
This is not a rich, muscular.
No. Like even the bigger 5 nights, which we had 2019, which I mistakenly labelled as Brimridge that one year. That was like.
It was Brimridge.
We can talk about that.
Yeah.
That was I think James Bissett already has talked. That was a great interview. If you haven't seen that, have a look. Has reprimanded me for that one, but. That 2019 Brimridge /5 night was the biggest one in terms of like palate weight, and it was still like really nice and linear. So I really love that.
Yeah, I mean that's my overriding sense of Paardeberg Chenin and how it separates itself from the others is that sort of what I call basil stem. You probably also green citrus.
Basil stem, look at you go.
But it's the only thing I've equated it to.
Somming away, bro. I love it. Yeah.
But I mean green citrus, almost lime. Surely.
Yeah, that's probably basil stem.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is. It's basil stem.
What's green citrus if it isn't lime?
Yeah.
And that's that laser beamy sort of pure straight through that
pure
tension in that.
Pure is a good word. I like that
tension
word.
in that mid palate.
Yeah.
Different Paardeberg Chenins have a different level of salinity and saltiness. Would you classify?
I think this is quite
or 5 night as a sort of a saline, having a saline quality. Or?
Yeah, I think it has a saline quality. But I don't know if it's specifically saltiness. It's kind of a mineral water sort of quality, like a sappy,
granite,
refreshing, granite kind of vibe. Compared to the next wine we're going to talk about, which like genuinely has actually like a salty saline kind of quality to it. And that could be because the bloody southeaster is blowing on it all summer long, so it might well pick up a little bit of sea salt. I'm not sure if it does.
So this is also granite?
That's also granite. So this is Nautical Dawn, and that's normally the second wine we show because I love to do tastings with 2 glasses and then show the 2 granite wines next to each other.
But this is not from the Swartland?
No, we've left the Swartland. We are now firmly in Stellenbosch and about as far south as you can go in Stellenbosch.
Right on the ocean, that's the nautical part.
That's the Nautical Dawn part, another slightly odd name.
This is Rustenhof?
Yes, so this is Peter Bradell's farm. It's a terrific piece of land. And he does a good job farming it, and actually his cousin Bernard, have you got that? His cousin Bernard was a friend of mine, and he's got the Signs of Sinai, which you're very familiar with, obviously, and work with.
Bernie.
Yeah, Bernie. He's one of my favorite young winemakers / vineyards in the Cape. I think he's really talented, and he's like really in the vineyards.
The Rain Man of the Helderberg.
Yeah, like I get these voice notes from him, like where he's going into detail about what's happening. I'm like, oh, this guy, bro.
Yeah.
Just want to drive over there and hug him.
Yeah. Loves a story.
Yeah. So he's very involved there, and he's definitely helps his cousin Peter, thinking about these in the right way. And I mean, Peter has been on board with us for a long time, and
those two guys are multi-generational farmers, great farmers.
Yeah, so the larger Bredel clan owned tons of land in Helderberg and on the Vaalsbeek coast, and I think almost want to say Rustenhof is one of the last enclaves of the Bredels in that area.
It is, yeah.
It may well be, but just brilliant, that. And I think that I love what Lucas and Rhiannon and the guys who are busy on Caribib and obviously my brother Donnie, Karinus, like that whole Vaalsbeek coast of Stellenbosch, up in that was Polkadry, this is Furgrove, but that whole strip of these granite, ocean influenced Stellenbosch spots, it's just starting to bloom. It's so exciting for me because it's kind of the poor cousin of the fancy sort of Simonsberg, Helderberg kind of, these like the glitterati, these millionaires that own wineries and that kind of thing.
I'm not sure.
And this is just regular, regular.
Prevail is in the Polkadry. I'm not sure he's the poor cousin.
Well, he was one of the original gangsters that started getting this part of the world on the map.
He's been doing it a decade to 2 decades longer.
Yeah, so there's Brevet to thank as well, and he really proved the point. And the guys have, it's an amazing part of the world. So we're very happy to work with this. And as you said, from the crest of the hill, and this vineyard's quite close to the crest of the hill, you can literally see the waves breaking on a clear day. So, and there's that southeaster pumping through the vineyard all the time. So it's definitely granite. And I know it sounds odd, and I do get a bit of pushback for this kind of thing, but tasting the wines, often I get like a picture of color, right? And like a background color, and I often see the background of granite as like really white. Like these lights that are bright white.
Don't look at them.
KGB.
Exactly. You will answer the
People ask the question. So I see the granites as having like quite a bright white background, and then just different colors projected onto that background. So for me, this is in that like more like geometric blue-green kind of world, and then this is more like arched and yellow. Yes, and obviously it's a mental association with the yellow flavors because it is way more yellow. Yeah, it's like that lemon oil, 100%. Almost touching into like green pineapple kind of vibe.
I've got pear skin. Is that
full on? It's there, and it's definitely like the sexy wine. It's got great acid, but it's got big flavor.
Slightly more generous than the
definitely. 5 by night is,
but not like overly.
This is more of like a nerd's wine. Or like just a Chenin Fiends wine, but this wine is going to make everybody happy.
Yes, right.
Yeah. It's a real crowd pleaser, and it's very dependable. I'd say now the 2023s that we've got in barrel now, it's the first vintage that I've doubted whether we're going to bottle it as a single. We may do, we may not. A few of the portions are really good. Some of them are like, meh. And that will be the first break since like 2017, if not every year, having a Nautical Dawn. It's such a consistent vineyard. It's really, really good. But it caught a little bit of the rains in 23, and there was a little bit of vitrus and that kind of thing, but it's such a great vineyard. So those are the Granite Brothers, basically.
And this is a vineyard that obviously you're buying fruit from. You're obviously involved in.
Yeah, not as much as I would. Not as much as I would like to be.
Bernard's there, who is more capable.
Bernie's there, and his family, right? Yeah. With Peter. Peter is a busy guy. He's running a big winery. Yes. He's running a huge farm. Yeah. So I don't want to bug him. Yes. So as long as he gets the pruning right, which he does, the suckering right, which he does, and the cover cropping right, which he does, I'm pretty much happy just to leave him be. I'm happy with his farming. I think.
But are you getting the same? Vines every year?
So we have a parcel that we get every year. So we have a parcel like in the upper mid slope, almost at the crest, which I absolutely love, and that normally makes Nautical Dawn, and then
the Grand Cru part of the slope.
Well, I wouldn't put it like that, but yes, definitely. Yeah. And then Bernie's just under us, really close, and then I can't remember who's below that. And then at the bottom of the slope, we've also got on the flat land, we've got a little portion. Okay. Which is
I think it's very good. I think it's Paul Sardi is the other one.
Paul's just above us.
Yeah, above us. Yeah. Okay.
Paul's got a few rows just above us. I think it's Bosperat is the name.
Bosperat's the
Paul Sardi.
Yeah.
Who said that again? Was
it
Neil Martin?
Everybody. It's stuck. Yeah.
Poor Paul.
Bosperat's his Swartland wine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, we got off topic here.
Yes. Okay. Well, those are the Granite
ones. So this is quite a large vineyard then. If there's so many people coming out of it,
yeah,
or you only get a small portion. Or?
Yeah, we only get a small portion of it. Well, we get a good chunk of it.
Yes.
I think we we range between like 6 and 8 tons a year.
Okay.
This, yeah. So it's significant for us. It's a good
Yeah.
pick. Yeah. It's a full truck.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Quite
that's
long rows as well.
yeah, and they kind of curve around the contour. So they start facing like southeast, all the way down to almost due east.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you find different qualities along that?
I think the eastern stuff is normally like probably a smidge, and I do mean a smidge ahead of the southeastern stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, we just pick it as a parcel.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
okay.
we don't try to fiddle. And then the other thing is he's running a big farm. He's got a picking team. That's what they're picking that day.
Yes.
You know, at least he's picking it into small crates for us. You know,
Yes.
so we try to play ball with the farmer and make their life easy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to make grapes if the farmer won't grow them.
If he can.
Make wine
if the farmer won't grow grapes, you know.
Yeah.
So we don't want to be a pain in the arse. But we've loved working with Peter over the years. He's pretty easy to work with, and the wine's terrific. It's a really good wine.
Out of all of the vineyards that you work with, this is probably the one that I'm most familiar with.
Okay.
Because obviously there's other people involved,
Yes,
and it's the closest one to where you know all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
So I've walked this vineyard quite often with
See all the granite on the surface.
with Bernard as well.
Yeah.
And there is different what seem to be. I mean, I'm not a viticultural expert by any means, but different clones of Chenin in the vineyard. I mean, some of the stems are red and some of them are green, and it's a really interesting. I mean, this is where Bernard gets
Mix up,
super geeky and super interesting.
Yeah, some of the petioles are quite pink.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's different selections of Chenin. It may well be.
Yeah.
I do know that all I can comment, and Bernie's probably he spends a lot of time in the vineyard. He knows it well. So
Yes.
I haven't noticed that myself. Mostly because, like with another thing with Chenin, is you see like a bunch shape and grape shape seem to be pretty consistent throughout the vineyard. Look, in my experience, although there is a patch, a slightly younger patch, close to one of those, the electrical poles,
Yes.
where they had to take out some vines, and there's a little slightly younger vineyard section there. So I mean that is a little different, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was planted in 1978. You know, so it was probably right in the zone of like those SN selections, those KWV SN selections of Chenin. That was like the stuff available at the time. So it's probably 264 or one of those.
Yeah.
I can't remember all the numbers.
Yeah, it's a super interesting conversation.
I love that vineyard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very,
I know, and like Bernie is the guy. He's a Helderberg specialist. You know, he's putting in a lot of time there.
Yeah.
I actually need to call him on the way out of here now. Just thinking about it.
Well, the drive's just long enough for him to.
Yeah, I've got it from here. I'm going here. I've got to go.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Then you've got enough time. Perfect.
I've got to go and check what's going on.
You'll get half the story. That's great.
Yeah. So those are two granite vines, vineyards. They're pretty cool. Then I suppose next we can look at the two Skurfberg wines.
Okay, which one first?
What's that other one down there? Can't see that far.
That's the Semillon.
That's the Sem. We can talk about that at the end.
Okay.
Let's look at
Put this this side.
let's look at those guys.
Hailkrans or
Hailkrans, I think. Yeah. So Hailkrans there's a farm up there called Odam
so this is the first introduction to Afrikaans
on the label.
on the label.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hailkrans. It's a name. It means weeping cliff, which sounds much cheesier in English. So,
It does.
Afrikaans is a beautiful language. Hailkrans is a nice name. So there's a cliff on the farm overlooking the vineyards. It's not a very big cliff. It's probably 12 or 15 meters high, but it's up close to the top of the mountain. And when it rains, which doesn't happen that often, then the cliff will drip or weep.
Yeah.
So that's the name they've given
Every century or so.
when they get more than X. Well, yes, you should see how wet. I was up there about 10 days ago. It's super wet up there now.
Is it?
Unbelievable. Yeah, they had a terrific winter.
That's great.
So the vines are looking quite happy because, as you know, we almost lost this vineyard in 2020. It was so dry. It's unbelievably dry, and everything was dying, and the leaves were
Maybe
dropping.
talk us through the location.
Yeah, okay. So if you drive up the N7 towards Namibia, and you drive past Namibia to Angola,
You've gone slightly too far.
you've gone too far. But you're on your way up to Nam. And
Buy a Tafel, and then
Yeah.
by the time,
Come
by
on
the time you
back.
drink it, you'll be there.
So it's further north than people traditionally thought you could make good wine in South Africa, and then
So how many kilometres, how many hours
For
north,
us,
north of Cape Town? So
geez, I don't know from
plus minus. north of-
well, it's far. So from where I live to Arbeidsend is 328 k's, but with all the twists and turns, it takes to about 4.5 hours in the bakkie, and in a truck it takes about 5 hours to get there. So it's a full like 2.5 hours north of this farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this would be one of the trying to get the right word here, highest latitude southern hemisphere vineyards making quality wine.
I guess I can't speak for South America. I understand that they've got some amazing high altitude stuff.
Yes, that's right.
You know, even
like
Salta and on the border of Bolivia and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do know that in the African context, South African context, definitely
It's about as north as you can get.
Yeah, I mean, look, the guys in Saki, you know, in Vredendal.
That's true.
It's further up,
Yeah,
and
Prisca
they're
as
right
well.
on the. Well, Prisca is a whole different ballgame.
Is Vredendal just north of this?
Vredendal's north of
Is
this,
it?
and
Okay,
it's
right.
on the mouth of the Olifants feed, and then it's got
Okay.
that like red sands, like
Yeah.
really iron rich, like a lot like this.
Okay.
I mean, and the Atlantic is bloody freezing, you know, so you can make reasonably good wine
Yeah,
there.
right.
And like if you taste Saki's wines, you know, he's on a really good wicket.
Yes,
He's
for
making
sure.
fantastic wine.
So no, disregard everything I said.
So, yeah, but what makes this place interesting, okay, so you drive up the N7, you get to the Clanwilliam turnoff, but instead of turning right to Clanwilliam, you turn left towards Lambertspy.
Okay.
And then the road climbs quite a lot. It just climbs and climbs and climbs, and then eventually you come into a little valley, and there's a right turn that says Skurfberg. I'm going there tomorrow if you want to join me, because you haven't been up there yet.
I'll have to.
We'll talk afterwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's gravel road. You go in there, and then you're in the world of rooibos tea farms.
Okay.
Yeah, rooibos and sheep. And then Odam is on that road. Arbeidsend is off and up on the ridge, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, it's far away. Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's basically the northern. If you look on Google Earth, you can see it's like almost like the northern fingers, the northern foothills of the Cederberg, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have this huge Cederberg range, and then it sort of spreads north and west a little bit, and we're in those northwestern ridges. So yeah, rooibos tea land.
So how far away from the ocean are you, more or less?
I think as the crow flies, I've checked on Google Earth, I think it's 36 k's as the crow flies on Arbeidsend, which is the Magnetic North farm, and this will be very similar.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can actually, especially in the late afternoons, that you can feel the wind turning in from the sea.
Oh, you can get
yeah,
that
because
from
it's almost like a channel, and you can
Right.
see that there's a road that goes down to the sea there, and if you stand there, you'll see it's like a V.
Yes.
So this is at about 450 meters above sea level, so it's pretty reasonable elevation, but it is hot, right?
Yeah.
It's not a cold area.
Yes.
So it's warm, and that's one of the reasons people thought, you can't really do anything serious here. And then Eben obviously kicked off with his old wine series. He had the Skurfberg wine, which at that stage was a blend of 3 different.
And was that
vineyards.
originally through Rusa? Or?
Yeah, well, through Rosa and the I can't remember the guy's name. The viticulturist who was working with Vinpro.
Okay.
At the time,
Right.
got Rosa into these vineyards, and then
Yeah.
Jeff Ubad, a real legendary figure in certainly in our first few years making wine. He helped us a lot in the vineyards. Jeff was also very involved with these farmers.
Okay.
Brilliant old guy, and he was just such a gem to have, helping us with our pruning and trying to get the vineyards fine tuned and all that. Amazing guy. Anyway, also helped me with Radio Lazarus quite a lot.
Okay.
Jeff.
Jeff, good, strong name.
Jeff.
Yeah.
So Jeff was involved early on as well with the farmers, and it's the Fisser family. They've got, give or take, 6 hectares of bush vine Chenin close to the farmhouse. We're hoping to plant more. That's another reason for the existence of Year After Year.
Okay.
So we have a place to put young vineyard stuff from the Skurfberg.
Yes.
And we started with a little bit of one of the blocks in the first year, and we've grown into that farm. So we basically take all of it now. So it plays an important role in cartology, and then Hemel-en-Aarde is basically a vineyard selection from that farm.
Okay.
And it changes a bit vintage to vintage depending on what's really shining.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a red sand. It's
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
It's red sand over red clay.
So like quite iron rich, I'm assuming, if it's red?
Yeah, iron rich, and somebody told me manganese. That sounds right.
Okay.
But if you dig down, you'll have a meter to a meter and a half of sand, and then you get like a gravel strata, and then clay.
Okay.
Yeah, and that does change. It's not totally homogeneous, but that's the basic picture there. So you get that root branching through the gravel into the clay, and that root branching, so lots of root tips, really good for the hormonal balance of the plant.
So when you say red, are you talking about coffee clips sort of derived?
Yeah,
or?
no, it's sandstone derived.
Okay.
It's just not very washed out.
Okay.
It's when I say red, I'm trying to.
Like
It's
terracotta.
like redder than that.
Yeah. Okay.
And it depends. Sometimes it's pale on top and red when you dig.
Okay.
But yeah, it's largely kind of pale red sand
Okay.
over clay.
And water retention, how does
The
that?
clay helps
Yeah. Okay.
because there's very low rainfall, and that's
Yes.
another reason for the way they've planted.
Yeah. I mean, it's like 200, 300 mils a year, sort of.
Yeah, you're in the 300 mil a year kind of
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
Crazy.
And then back in 2020, we had like 300 mils over 2 years or something like that. It was really, really bad.
No idea.
No, it was dodgy. But so, like in Spain, in Toro and places like that, they plant like 3 meters by 3 meters. You know,
Yes.
that's the same as these guys. It's
Yeah.
the old 10 by 10 foot by 10 foot planting.
Yeah.
And that's just so that every vine can effectively have more soil volume.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, you have like 1,000-ish vines a hectare. It's not a lot. Right. You know, so if every vine's giving you a kilo, kilo and a half in a good year, you know, that's what the yields are. You know? So we get like
same density as oak forests, essentially.
Exactly. So, and I mean, Barcy Fundel, who passed away earlier this year, a wonderful man, he always used to refer to them as boome, a boom, a tree, as a grape tree.
Yeah.
And they look like little trees. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
They're huge vines. They're like anacondas, man. They're really gorgeous vines, like thick, really like poster boy kind of very picturesque vineyards.
So Bushmans, are they pruned quite high, quite low?
So I mean, over the years they've just grown up. So you've got these long arms. So now, you know, the tappies, the spurs will be like waist high, and then when the canopy comes up, sometimes they look you right in the eye. You know, like a black mamba.
Yes.
But yeah, so they're big plants, and but they make really good wine. Yeah, I love this place. It's one of my absolute.
When did you first go there? What was your?
Rosa took us up there in 2011.
Okay.
Later in that, well, I went up to early 2011 before the vintage, and then one or two times after that. I remember when Dirk Nipwood's boy Daniel was visiting. He was very young. He drove up with us. It was just a really cool day. Jeff Hubert was there checking out the vines. And Suzaan was very pregnant with Elizabeth, so I remember that really well. And getting lost on the first day that we had to go and pick there, and I was driving Hunter's old 70 series Land Cruiser Bucky and a big trailer on the back, and like I'd left at like 1 in the morning, and I got lost, and I was still late for the pick. And
Perfect.
Josh was really nice with me, but I could see he was a bit irritated that I was late. But since then, I've always been on time. Yeah. So we've really had a wonderful working relationship with the family through thick and thin. I mean,
so this has been in Alheit Vineyard story the whole time.
It's never left, and now we have basically full control over the Chenin there. And we're very glad that that's the case. And they've got the son-in-law of a buddy of theirs managing the vineyard now. He's a very sharp.
Son-in-law of a buddy of theirs. Okay,
yeah, so a buddy of theirs is helping them with the farming.
Yeah.
It's a long story. So Cully, their son, passed away in 2017 in a car accident. It was very sad. And so they've had lots of changes with the farming setup over the years, and now it's a good friend of theirs that's helping them with the farming, and his son-in-law Philip is running the vineyard now. Okay. And he's a proper farmer.
Right. And how does that relationship work? I mean, does Etienne get involved there?
Yeah.
And goes
so
out
Etienne's coming up with me tomorrow.
Okay.
So he's up there with me quite regularly, and sometimes if I'm away or if I can't make it, he'll go up on his own and talk to them. But all the farmers up there are on the border.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not like you ask them to do something and then you come back and it was never done. Like when I went now to check on the suckering, was it 10, 12 days ago? Brilliant. I was like, oh. So I was almost a waste of time coming up. It was so good. I was like, okay, there's nothing to say here. Thank you. I say thank you for doing a good job. Yeah. The suckering is key.
Right.
Yeah, very important.
Right. Just to keep
everything, really. Like that whole crop canopy balance, your pruning for the next year, everything. It's really important. Okay. Airflow in the vines.
It sounds like it's a secondary crop up there, though, because it's on the edge of viability. Are they majority rooibos and sheep farmers?
Rooibos is the money up there, but that's also quite a volatile industry. I don't understand the inner workings, but there's one big company that has a lot of power over the price,
right?
And that can work. It can work really well for the farmers, or it can be a disaster. And so there's a monopoly going on. So probably good for the industry to see a few small rooibos producers getting stronger and stronger. Okay. Just for just a more realistic price.
But that's their main.
Rooibos is the main income. Yeah. They've got sheep and leopards, which eat the sheep. Okay. Lots of Cape Mountain leopards up there.
Right. Okay.
And then the vines, and I think the vines are becoming more and more important because
not as boggy damage thanks to leopards, I would assume.
There we go. The leopards keep the antelope away.
Yeah. Maybe that was the missing link for
Radio Lazarus. If only I'd had more leopards in
exactly,
Stellenbosch. Payments from the cooperatives doesn't really make sense for them.
Yeah. Tonnage is not the reason why they're growing grapes.
Exactly, and these vineyards also used to disappear into larger blends with stuff down in the valley, in the valley floor, and it's in a completely different league. So with this and with some other farmers, but this in particular, these guys, we do work on a per hectare basis, and that's something that I'm quite keen on getting into the mentality of farmers and wine producers that are working with low yielding old vineyards. The only way to make sure that the farmer is okay and is actually prospering and not just surviving,
Yes.
is to pay him per hectare a good price.
Yeah.
And then if you only get a ton a hectare, that's on you.
Mm-hmm.
You can't expect him to keep the vines in the ground for 15 or 20 grand a ton for 1 ton of grapes for the hectare. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So he needs to get a per hectare remuneration that makes sense. And then the winery can then go and put their margin on it and also share in the risk, and actually shoulder the risk, because the risk is on somebody. The risk is either on the farmer or on you.
Yeah.
So, if you want to get the shine from making nice wines out of really cool old vineyards, you need to be able to take the risk.
But I mean, you're taking the risk, but you're also taking the majority of the margin increase from up until that point.
Exactly. So you're doing the whole value add.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're partaking in the value chain. You need to be able to shoulder the risks. I think it's unfair when young producers, catch a lot of shine and make a good margin, but won't shoulder the risk. I don't think that's right. Yeah. Anyway.
We've chatted about that before, but we'll chat about that again at some point.
So Hellkrans as a wine is very Skurfberg, and it was actually you that I think it was you that first sort of remarked on the kind of mineral background where we talked about the granites being quite white or quite clear. Is it sort of tea-stained, a little rusty?
Yeah.
With the Skurfberg wines, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that comment years ago, whenever it was.
Yeah.
There definitely is. There's something else going on in the mineral background, in the mineral profile with the Skurfberg wines, in both of them, and generally they tend to have really, really good acidity.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
that's interesting from a place that has
I
no
know,
water
and I don't know why.
And
I don't know if it's to do with deep, cool clay soils or
Yeah.
what it is. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So we normally get reasonably good ripeness up there with pretty killer acid. So it's usually, and 22 is a bit of an exception. They're more normal acids, but a normal vintage for Skurfberg is the wines are acidic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what sort of numbers are you like on an average or a sort of
a
a median year? I don't know.
A median year, you'd be having a Hellkrans of 14 alcohol with anywhere between a finished like post mallow TA of between 6 and 6.5. And then around 6.5 for Magnetic North with an alcohol of somewhere between 13 and 13.5. So that's quite good for unacidified dry farm Chenin. Most years Cartology is hovering between and that's like a really good snapshot of Cape Chenin is hovering between 5.5 and 6 grams TA.
Yeah, right.
At about 13 to 13.5 alcohol.
And
so those are kind of normal numbers for us. Yeah.
Right. And is that why the alcohol tends to be higher in these two wines rather than the other wines you have?
Yeah, sometimes. Hellkrans especially, and Hellkrans also ripens up fast. So often we'll have a Hellkrans of at least 13.5 alcohol, but then it can be a brutal wine. Like I don't know if you remember the 19, that was a monster. That was 14 alcohol, and I think it had a finished acid of around 7, and it was just a beast.
Yeah.
And it's not like that every year, it was just a vintage.
It was a proper muscly.
Yeah, it was a big Chenin.
Yeah.
I love that wine. And then Magnetic North, also 2019, was also like 14 alcohol with a massive acid.
Should we move along?
Yeah, we can go on to Magnetic North because they're basically brothers.
Yeah. So how are these the same and how are they different?
They're the same and they've grown on very similar soils.
Yeah.
Basically red sand over red clay with gravel in between. They're different in that this is Odam, Hellkrans. Odam has some older vines dating back to I think 71 is the oldest parcel. And I think as late as 1985 is the youngest parcel. So it's got some younger, some older. Where Arbeidsend, the two parcels that we work with on this farm, are both early 80s. So the older one is 1981 and the younger one is 1983.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just quickly, wine of origin Citrus Style Mountain?
Yes.
Wine of origin
Citrus Style Mountain.
Olifant Traffier or Citrus Style Mountain?
So this is, we could have made the Citrus Style Mountain. This is an older bottle from 2014.
Okay.
I just needed it as a prop because I don't have any...
but so they're both now Citrus Style Mountain?
They're both Citrus Style Mountain, which is for me a total misnomer. I don't know why we use that as an origin name. Citrus Style and Clanwilliam are miles apart.
So it's not really super
No,
close to
they're not
Citrus
close
Style.
at all. I mean, it's like having Stellenbosch wine and calling it like Robertson Origin. It's just maybe not that far, but they're so far apart.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. The area is similar. It's that really West Coast feeling, but like Citrus Style Mountain as an origin for this area, I don't understand why.
Maybe because the farms are so big, it's only 2 farms away.
Farms are big, but I don't understand why Salvis has chosen that as a name.
Okay.
So
You're labelling these as both Citrus Style Mountain now.
Yeah. But in kind of the modern context in South African wine and with people that are into it, everyone talks about Skurfberg.
Yes.
Yeah, so the name of the road is the Skurfberg Road, And then Eben called his first wine from this area Skurfberg, and then that just stuck, and everyone talks about Skurfberg, even though technically that's his intellectual property. But,
Yes.
yeah. So, Citrus Star Mountain. So these farms are quite close together. They're about 10 minutes drive apart, but there is an elevation difference. So Odam is around 450 meters above sea level. And then the vineyards on Arbeidsend is the farm that makes Magnetic North. These vines started at about 520, 530 meters above sea level up to about 550. So they're a bit higher up. And they're also right on a ridge. So from that ridge, you can look down to the sea and actually see the ocean. So they're quite elevated.
Okay.
And then this has still got the long old name that we use, Magnetic North Mountain Muckstock, which was just too long, and I shortened it in 2017 just to Magnetic North because it sounded like a law firm. It was just too many words.
You started to get a bit savage-esque, didn't you?
Oh, yes. Oh, thanks. Was never been kissed, or what was that?
Yeah.
He's got some goodies.
I get them.
I get the wines confused. But
I get them all backwards. And
he's on a good wicked old Savage. He's making bloody great wine. Anyway, Savage, the Silver Fox.
He and Rosa have the same haircut.
So, where were we? All right. So Magnetic North
was Magnetic North Mountain Muckstock.
Yes, it's now Magnetic North.
And Muckstock's just like bush vine, essentially?
Muckstock means ungrafted vine.
Okay, ungrafted.
So that's another difference between Odam and Arbeidsend. The vineyards we work with, they are really interesting, like Marcel selection vineyards. That the material came from vines in the valley that Barcy and his dad went and collected from a farmer from an older existing vineyard that's now gone.
Yes.
And then basically came with a tractor spade cut and just made a hole in the sand and plonked the shoots in there, and now we have this unbelievable DNA.
Yeah, right.
Okay, we don't know exactly, and we've got two blocks there, 10 and 13. 13 is my age, is planted in 1981, and 10 is planted in 83. And they are a little different. There seems to be a slight DNA difference there.
That's interesting.
10 we usually pick on the earlier side at around like 13 alcohol, and that's extremely acidic and very, like grapefruit.
Okay.
Yeah, and then
but still with that sort of pithy sort of character.
Full on pithy, grapefruity, and then block 13 I like to get to at least 13.5 alcohol because the acid otherwise is unmanageable. It's got a really high acid, and that tends into that more like Vouvray, kind of like Angelica, really interesting Chenin, like more classic Chenin, like honey and floral.
These can get a bit waxy at times.
I think when they age a bit, they can do. They're definitely textural wines. They're really powerful wines normally. Still, my favorite is the one that I picked too early, which was the 2018. That was a 13 alcohol wine, and it had an acid of over 8 after mellow, and it was such a great wine. But it wasn't a crowd pleaser because it felt like your face was getting ripped off every time you had a sip. But it was such a nice wine. It was just electric.
Anyway. You can pull through the back of your head.
So I love the 18, but the 2020 for me was also remarkable. It had like a rooibos tea, grapefruit rooibos tea kind of nose, which was super unusual. I've never had a wine since like that. So, so that if I had to pick a vineyard to kind of go to war with overseas, if you wanted to prove a point about South African Chenin, I think a good vintage of Magnetic North is a good starting point. Yeah, okay. Maybe a good vintage of Hellkrans, just to say cool, we can also play. Yeah,
and these seem very unique. To the Cape. Whereas Chenin on granite is Chenin on granite, and there's other places around the world with Chenin on granite, but these, with the climate, the situation,
it's a weird space, Barry. It's a weird place, and it's amazing,
Irreplicable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Irreplicable?
Is that a word?
It is now.
I like it.
Yeah.
Let's go with it. So it's irreplicable.
Irreplicable. You can't replace it.
Yes. Irreplaceable.
Irreplaceable. You can't make a replicate.
You can't replicate it.
You can't replicate it.
Yeah. Right. So we know what we're saying. Cheers. Yeah. Thank you, Chablis. I think the wines are super unique, and they are unique to the Cape. And it's like, as I said before, it's unexpected.
Yes.
That far north, that you would find this kind of thing. And thank you to Rosa, Eben, and Jeff that really got the Skurfberg thing going. Yeah. I'm so stoked with this vineyard. I love Arbeidsend.
So if these two wines have huge TAs, are you
normally not in 22, but normally?
But it's just generally, are you putting these in sort of smaller?
That's a good question with the winemaking.
Yeah,
I like to use the like 1800 and 2000 liter stockages for these.
Okay.
And then also for Odam, I like to use because Odam goes into that orange blossom So Hemel-en-Aarde gets into that really sexy, like ripe citrus, orange blossom kind of thing, and,
Yes.
and I like 300s and 400s.
Okay.
Because just a bit more air.
But no cement, no concrete here, or
I do actually
minimal?
now. The last 2 years, I've started
Okay.
using a cement egg for the early picked block,
Oh, right.
for block 10 on
For the very acidic block.
for the very acidic block, because I want to like let it go even more in that direction.
Okay.
I want to amplify that part of its personality.
Right. And is that to sort of, in part, to blend back into Cartology and
No,
make a wine through that, or
so
is that
very
for
little of
one?
this wine goes into Cartology.
Okay.
The Cartology is normally like 2% from Arbeid
Right,
Cent,
okay.
and be like 12% from Odam.
Okay.
So the Skurfberg part of Cartology is usually more Odam, just because we have more.
Okay.
So we've only got the 2 small blocks on Arbeid Cent.
Yeah.
So most of that will go into Magnetic North in a given year.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Yeah. So and I love the Skurfberg area. I'm excited. I have to get up at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning to go there, but I'm excited. And I'm still excited after 12 years of doing it.
Very cool.
It's very cool.
We had a bit of a coffee break.
Still having mine.
But yeah, I wanted to ask you about the labels, because they're
Yes.
quite striking. There's a nice aesthetic to them.
Thanks, David.
Obviously, Cartology sits by itself, and then the others have a lot of familial quality. How is that process gone through?
Like I said to you before the forced coffee break, I drew all of these myself.
Yes. Yeah.
But no, we've got a great working relationship with Ruan from Archival, previously of Vanakalo. And he's just really good at getting an idea down onto paper. You know, for like the wine that's in focus now, Magnetic North. You know, we had had an idea. You know, I was listening to a lot of Bon Iver at the time, and I like that sort of like overdubbed, sort of dreamy sound. You know, that kind of vague, mysterious.
Yes.
You're not sure if you're awake or asleep kind of feeling. And
Yeah. Well, that's another thing you've got in common with Stompy. He's also Isolde Scene is the name of a Bon Iver song.
yeah, it's one of my favorite of his songs. Really,
Yeah.
really cool. Justin Vernon, something of a genius. Anyway, so this label, you know, with the name Magnetic North, you know, it's obviously it's a natural phenomenon, right? But it's always moving. You know, Magnetic North itself. It's,
Yes.
So you can't really like put your hand on it or grasp it. It's like an unattainable, and then there's a lot of iron in the soil up there. So that's the magnetic element, and also there's the implication of attraction, and it is pretty much freaking north of our winery. So the name made sense on a lot of levels, and I like names that work on a few different levels. It's something I like to do, even if they're a bit odd. I can do what I want. Yes.
Yeah.
So so he got that. So I wanted to have like something with like an iron filings, magnetic kind of look, and
Yes.
he pulled that off. And then with the Hemel-en-Aarde label, for instance, that there's an illustrator back in the day that used to do amazing landscapes of like the Swartberg Pass, and I think his name was Kannemeyer, and Ruan really liked his stuff.
Okay.
So, you know, when Cully passed away, we wanted to have like almost like Cully caught in shot, you know, like in a postcard, like a wish you were here kind of feeling. So there's the white frame and the landscape, and then Cully there in his 2 tones.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's quite a meaningful label for us.
Yeah.
They all have personal like significance or meaning for us in some way.
I noticed that the 509 is the only one that hasn't really got a vineyard in it.
Yes, it's not a literal.
Yeah.
It's not a literal label.
This seems a bit more
Yeah.
philosophical, maybe, or
Yeah, sort of metaphor.
spiritual, perhaps.
No, maybe a little spiritual.
Yeah.
But it's it's something. We always have scripture references on the bottles.
Yeah.
And this one is on the little boat, actually, on the side
Yeah.
of the boat. It's from Mark's Gospel. But so it's like it's also, there's a little line that says an ode to the mountain, and obviously, you know, the term fire by night comes from the book of Exodus, when the Lord is leading the Israelites out of slavery. He's appearing to them as a pillar of fire by day, cloud by day and fire by night. And I love, and then obviously we both feel that the Paardeberg was like really central in kickstarting where we're going, you know, and
And maintaining it as well.
and maintaining it in the modern
It wasn't
scene.
it wasn't just a catalyst. It's a permanent influence.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like really like, I suppose another guy, Andre, my friend, city on a hill. You know, like you could also say Paardeberg is like a city on a hill. You know, so definitely like a guiding light. And then I like the motif of a person out at sea, or like, you know, struggling to get to a point. And anyway, this picture came out.
Or get away from a point, perhaps.
So it's kind of a personal label. And then Nautical Dawn. Nautical Dawn seems like an odd name, but I wanted a name that would take people close to the sea and facing east. and it's obviously like an artistic rendition of False Bay from the vineyard, and with a sentinel there.
Looking sort of towards Gordons Bay, I suppose.
Yeah, pretty much, exactly. Yeah. And so Nautical Dawn is the middle phase of dawn. Oddly, it's
middle phase of dawn.
Yeah, so you have astrological dawn, which is the very first light.
Okay.
You have nautical dawn, which is when it's light enough to see what you're doing on your boat, but still dark enough to navigate by star.
All right.
Yeah, and then you have civilian dawn, which is when you and I have to go to work. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Wow.
So those are the three phases of dawn that I'm aware of.
No, yeah. You go to work. I'm still asleep. I'm probably still out, to be fair. That's when I should go home.
Yeah. You're at the end of your work day.
Nautical dawn is when the street lights are on. I have to go home.
So it sounds like a made-up name, but it is actually a real phrase in the English language. And I wanted something, as I said, facing east, close to the sea.
And Flotsam and Jetsam just had a nautical.
I had a nautical, and
well.
obviously Cartology with the map grids and stuff has the implication of like exploration or adventure. And Flotsam and Jetsam, old shipping English for just bits and pieces, Flotsam and stuff that's been jettisoned off a ship. And so yes, there is.
Flotsam was non-deliberate, and Jetsam was
deliberately jettisoned to save a ship.
Yeah,
and I love that name for Cinzo for me was ideal. The way that
Cinzo made a lot of sense.
Basically been jettisoned, in favour of many other things.
Very cool.
So those are the labels, and then that's so. Let's talk about the
Semillon,
or the Semillon, sorry, because we haven't talked about the Sem, and we can talk about that label a little bit, I guess.
So
that's Monument. It used to be called La Colline. That's a single vineyard, black capsule, single vineyard wine.
Franschhoek.
Yeah, we only have one Semillon vineyard, and it would be arrogant to say that I think it's the best Semillon vineyard in the Cape, but I part of me thinks that it probably is the most amazing site.
It's the best one you work with.
It's the best Semillon vineyard I work with. Yes, exactly. I know there is one up in Skurfberg on the Lang farm, which is terrific.
That makes a lovely wine.
I just love this one a lot. Anyway, so it's a really cool family, the Roux family, really salt to the earth people, and they work with their hands. They're hard grafting fruit farmers, and they've got this old vineyard that the Oupa Grietjie planted, that the great grandfather planted.
Is this the registered oldest vineyard you work with, or?
It's not the oldest vineyard we've ever worked with, but it's the oldest vineyard we work with on an annual basis. Right. Yeah. On paper, with the record keeping, I'm not sure how good it was, but it was planted in 1936 on paper, but the man who planted it passed away in 1938, so we're not so sure. And most of the other Semillon that's like genetically similar to this in the Franschhoek Basin is planted between like 1900 and 1910.
Yeah.
So who knows? Anyway, point is the vines are nice and old, but it's on a great site. It's on the southern slope of the Dassenberg, which is that mountain in the middle of the valley. So it's kind of orange granitic soil with a lot of quartz in the soil. And we get two parts of the vineyard. We get the very top, which is at about 340 meters above sea level. And that usually is the portion that makes Monument.
Right.
And then we get a nice band of the mid-slope. And that's usually the portion we use for Cartology, but it can change. It depends.
Right.
We pick them at different times. The upper slope stuff where the shallow soil ripens quite quickly has less opportunity to lose acid. So it generally has a slightly better acidity. And then the mid-slope stuff, the vines are a bit happier. They tend to ripen a bit longer. The wines are quite textural. Yeah.
So you used a word to describe the soil that I haven't heard very often in South Africa is the word orange.
Yeah.
It's usually red. Or is that a
kind
deliberate word? Or?
Yeah, it's like pale orange. It's not really red.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like yellow-red.
Okay.
It's orange.
That's kind of orange,
yeah.
So is it, again, iron-derived or?
I don't know.
You don't know, okay.
No. I think that that potassium feldspar portion of the granite, when it breaks down and compacts again, it makes those like that orange-coloured soil.
Okay.
But I don't know, because it gets a lot of rain, so you'd think the soil would be paler from just washout.
Okay. From
leaching. I'll have to ask Etienne, he's really good at that stuff. I passed my soil science exams, but that was the last time. Long time ago.
Books, yeah, okay. You said it was a wet area?
Well, Franschhoek picks up quite a bit of rain, and this is right at the back of the valley, surrounded by mountains, so it does get a bit more rain than most of our other vineyards. And despite the fact that it's so old, it yields quite well.
Yeah.
So this will yield like happily 4 tons a hectare, which is terrific for old vines. So it's a huge privilege to work with. I mean, have I taken you to this one yet?
I've been there with other people, but yeah.
Okay, so
I cheated on you.
So if you go above the pine tree, that marks where our site, our part of the vineyard begins. And you kind of up off the floor, and you're like on the slope looking down at Franschhoek. it's really something, you know. And the vines are bloody, like these massive gnarly old things, and also it seems like they're planted on top of each other. But if you look at some angles, you can still see the original rows that were planted, you know, for a pre-tractor world, you know.
Yes,
Horse-drawn. Yeah. So it's really a pre-industrial vineyard, and I mentioned earlier that the DNA is super interesting. It's, you know, a few different colors of Semillon, at the very least 2, but I think probably more like 4 different shades.
Depends on your tolerances. Yeah.
Yeah, and it depends on, you know, sun exposure can make things lighter or darker, you know. So, but
Is disease pressure a problem here?
Old vineyards, it has leaf roll, but it doesn't really seem to affect it.
But I mean, like rot and
disease pressure can be an issue here because it is wet and because it is like it's quite a densely planted vineyard. So this is a vineyard that we definitely sort a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of the vineyards that absolutely always gets sorted every year. Where some vineyards like Skurfberg, I mean, you sort in the vineyard, you can sort at the winery if you want to, but you're pretty much wasting your time.
We're speaking a lot about nautical influences here. I'm assuming that this is quite, you know, around the corner. Not a lot of sea breeze coming through here?
No, not really, no.
Yeah.
The nights are quite cool.
Okay.
Because you probably have cold air bucketing off the mountains. It's really surrounded by it's in a bowl of mountains. It's very pretty there. Mm-hmm. But no, I don't think a big nautical influence here at all. And as I said, you know, the Semillon is a completely different animal to the Chenins, and I just want it to be what it is. You know, and it's nothing like modern Semillon. On the nose, you know, often it's in that sort of like green cherry, even like notchy, weird, not quite marzipan, but it's in that sort of world. And the wines are nice and textured. In a good vintage, it's really it's a hell of a wine.
So when you say it's a completely different beast, are you approaching it differently, or is it just manifest itself differentently after you've done your...
Yeah, it's different. What I mean is...
Your patented Alheit process.
Yeah, so... there is a difference in the winemaking, mostly because Semillon can really struggle with reduction.
Okay.
And it seems to be related to the amount of solids that are in the ferment, obviously, I guess. So we do try to rack a little bit cleaner with the Semillon and with the Chenin.
Okay.
So slightly cleaner juice, and then I do tend to use smaller vessels for this.
Right.
So if I have some really good old 228s and good old 300s that I normally like to use for the Sem, just so that the surface area to volume ratio is more in favour of getting more air into the wine over time. Yeah.
And do you sometimes use batonnage as a way to sort of...
Yeah, I don't really have a rule about that. No, not really.
But you don't have a rule against it, is my point.
Yeah, I don't have a rule for it or against it. You know, we'll taste the wines. For me, normally batonnage is, because we do let the wines, you know, in the winemaking process, there's no sulfur at all until the winter time, right? Mm-hmm. So the wines are developing at different speeds. You know, I'll use that first sulfuring as a way just to kind of, if I see the wine developing, you know, I often describe it as like a bloom opening, yeah? And you don't want a bottle of wine that's completely open because there's nowhere to go. So you want to kind of catch it with that first sulfur when you can see the color and the shape, but it's not completely open, right? So that's my idea with the first sulfuring, and then it's the same kind of thing with batonnage. So almost use batonnage as a way of pulling back that development a little bit, because the lees is such a strong oxygen sink, you know, that it can kind of haul the wine back a little bit, and you can maybe do that in lieu of first sulfuring, and then sulfur on the next round of topping. You know, so, but no,
this is where, as you say, previously you said you've only got a couple of really difficult decisions to make in harvest.
Yeah.
But these other decisions strewn out through the rest of the year in the winery are equally as important, but maybe a less time critical.
Less time critical, and also, so you've got time to decide on when you're going to do that first sulfur. It does make a difference to the final wine, definitely. Yeah. But less time critical, less crunch. That suits me fine because I'm pretty slow.
Yes.
You know?
You're like sharpen the axe and then cut down the tree, mate. Okay. So, just like go crazy and.
I would have been like a horrifically bad chef. You know, I could probably put together like one good plate, you know, in the space of like half an hour, but
of a service.
Yeah.
So like, one table get an amazing
to like
meal,
10 out plate off plate off the plate of like perfect like.
And the other 20 tables go.
No, I would just be shocking at that. So winemaking suits me fine, so I can take my time and think about what I want to do. And,
I mean, most things happen slowly. Most things
happen slowly, except for when they're happening fast.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's in harvest time, and I've done enough harvest to be really good, really like prepared for that psychologically, and know what to do and what not to do. So I love harvest. It's my favorite time of year. I really love it. The only downer is that I don't see my family as much, and I'm busy buying a second press now to try to remedy that. So I figure if I have 2 presses, you know, then I can press a truck of grapes, you know, in one morning instead of in a whole day, and then I can maybe see my kids. That'd be great.
And in Semillon, are you working? I mean, you said you're not working with that much young Semillon. Are you still looking for vineyards? Is that,
I think we're pretty much through that part of our lives. I do still wonder if I should like restart that whole process, because I know that there's still really good old stuff out there. But
yes,
the
and that won't
also
remain true forever, will it?
Well, it depends. The industry's also changed quite a lot since we started. There are a lot more young folks around also looking for interesting resources, and they must do that. Hopefully they can pick up a few good old vineyards. And another thing we could probably touch on is this old vine project, which seems to have added quite a lot of value to that idea. And I mean, I argued a lot with Andre in the beginning about
Andre
Morgenthal about the idea, about the idea of the 35-year. 35 years old equals old vines.
As in the cutoff.
Yeah.
Or the qualification.
Exactly. And
what was your argument?
My argument was that we're not going to get, because Chile and Australia and California, they've got tons of like really old vines. But we are the country that's, because of people like Andre and Rosa, we've communicated it the best by far.
Yes.
So now we're associated with old vineyards.
Yeah.
But if you really open the kimono, maybe we don't actually have like as old a vineyards as those other guys. They're just not talking about it as well as we are.
Yes.
So I didn't want to go in and say, 35 years old, because it's not. I think like, mid 40s onwards, you can start talking about mature vines, like 60, 70, that's old vines.
Yeah, and I think.
But it's Andre, like, he really talked me into it, and I actually, in retrospect, think he was dead right. And this was Rosa's point as well, is that, okay, cool, we all know that 35 years isn't actually that old, but if you set that mark, then a farmer knows he's at 35 years going to be eligible to get likely better prices for his grapes. He's not going to pull out his 29-year-old vineyard, because he's not that far from being an old vine project vineyard.
Yeah.
And that was brilliant, because if they'd set it at 40 years, I think we would have lost a lot more 29-year-old vineyards.
Post 20-year-old vineyards, yeah.
Exactly.
Because it's when they start to.
That's when they're 25, they really start to dip off. Yeah. Generally, depends on where you are, if you've got irrigation, etc., etc. So actually, they made the right decision. I was wrong.
Very nice to hear you say that, Butchie.
It was. It happens.
It happens, yeah. Rarely, but it happens. I've also
more often than I'd
had some thoughts about this, and it's. I mean, the old vine thing is a great name for it. It draws people in, but I think in reality, it's the mature vine project.
Yeah, bro.
And these vines at 35 are mature.
They're mature.
Yeah, I mean they're not old, but they're mature,
and they're probably making as good a wines at 35 as they will be at 55. Frankly.
I mean, you'd be better placed to say that than most people. So yeah.
Yeah. So and the thing, and again, it's about site. So you're going to get your best interpretation or your best version of a site with nice mature vines, whose roots are like right through the soil structure. That's cool. So hopefully, where we can go from here is, again, we have mature vines, and I think the single vineyard thing is important too. But like, we need to get to isolating really, really good sites and putting value on a site and on a place, and I think we're getting there.
Yeah, but I think you're right about the communication. They've been phenomenal.
Yeah, brilliant.
At that, yeah. And I notice you're certified. All your things have the
the
qualified vineyards.
I do that. I like all of them have got the thing.
Have the certification.
Yeah, I think I just want to be a part of it, because we were obviously in it for a while before the thing existed, but we obviously Rosa and as if she asks you to be a part of something, then you'd say yes, ma'am.
No one says no to Tony Rosa.
I'm in. Yeah.
So, yes, Tony.
Yeah.
How high, Tony?
Exactly.
Hemel-en-Aarde or?
Yes.
If
I think first Hemel-en-Aarde, and then we're going to do the sweet wine.
Cool.
So that's the landscape. I've got a second cousin in Germany who's an illustrator, and she's obviously friends with the family and friends with Hans, and I thought it'd be really cool to give her a go to do a label for us. And there's this old photo of Hemel-en-Aarde that Suzaan took when we still lived on the farm, and sent her the picture, and like we thought, maybe she'll come back to us in a few weeks or in a month, and like 3 or 4 days later, she was like, I got excited, and I made it. It's brilliant. Yeah. It's such a cool label. So it really is, like, it really catches the place. So Hemel-en-Aarde is a very special place for us. It's obviously, and it's a black capsule, so it's one wine, one place. But it's a wine that, is a bit of a square peg in a round hole in some ways in our portfolio of like heritage wines and the specific message that we were trying to send out. But what not everybody realizes is it's a partnership between ourselves and Hans and Marianne. And when they were putting
of Hemel-en-Aarde.
Yeah. Yavanes is the surname. And when they were putting the whole thing together and looking at planting a vineyard in 2010, they'd got probably sound advice from consultants urging them to plant Sauvignon Blanc because they'd have a market for the grapes and maybe Pinot. So yeah, I flew up to Joburg and had a chat with Hans in a meeting, and both of us had been reading kind of the same set of books. We were both very interested in the south of France at that time and what was happening at Master de Muscasac and Grange des Pères and these interesting Olivier Julien, these guys that were repurposing a lot like what happened in the Swartland. But anyway, we don't have to go down that road too much. But I love the idea of having a wine from a place but a few different grapes. So Hemel-en-Aarde was basically a designed field blend in the end.
Okay.
And yeah, it was a bit of an odd combination, but it was a question like, okay, what do we want? What are the grapes we're really fascinated with? We know we've got a cold spot. It's bloody windy and cold up there. It hardly ever gets over 30 degrees. We know we've got poor soil.
So this is in the Hemel-en-Aarde Ridge?
This is on the Hemel-en-Aarde Ridge. Yeah, this is surrounding the winery, basically. What are we going to do? And this is the list of varieties available. So we went through them together and we're like, okay, cool. This is how we want the wine to kind of be. We wanted it to, we really wanted to work with Roussanne. I was kind of fascinated with Roussanne. So there's Roussanne here. There's obviously Chardonnay as a tip of the hat to the Hemel-en-Aarde, because amazing Chardonnay is coming from there. Chenin, I wanted something Capish. And then also, fascinated with Verdelho. It's a great wine grape, and had sort of touched some Verdelho in Western Australia, working at Horton. Yeah, white burgundy. There we go. And then again, just the tip of the hat to the history of the Cape. I thought a little bit of Muscat would be fascinating. Just as a bit of salt and pepper in the wine. And wrestling with that Muscat has been a challenge.
Is it Alexandria? Is it home port or is it?
No, it's the old Frontignan. Okay. Yeah, so it seems to be what they used in a lot of the old Constantia wines.
Yes.
So we had this, vines planted in rows so that we could farm them, but the standing rule is that like everything that grows in the field goes into the bottle. So the wine changes quite a lot every year. Some years the Roussanne is up, some years the Chardonnay is up. It's
these are planted in rows, so you get a variety of rows. Okay.
So it can be a frustrating wine for me because we put in this mammoth effort every year to trucking grapes in from these very exotic, wonderful old bush vines in the distance of it. Right here on my doorstep, I get by far the best analysis, the most amazing flavors and big wonderful nose and everything. So I can kind of sometimes think to myself, geez, Barry, why don't you just focus on the Hemel-en-Aarde anyway? So it's a wine that's grown, I think, in stature over the years as the vines have matured. The first release we did a little bit of something in 2014 with the Roussanne that we had, but the actual first Hemel-en-Aarde was 2015. Okay. And the wines have varied from being quite big to quite tart. I think we're starting to hit our stride with them now. But from a flavor perspective, the wines are always really exotic. Sometimes a touch of botrytis in the Chenin, sometimes more than a touch. Okay. So the wines can be really exotic. The Muscat is also a thing that I really had to figure out how to pare down from about 2016 onwards. Okay.
So too much personality?
Yeah. It's like, hey, I'm here. Look at me. Yeah. So 2016, when the wine was young, it was quite muscatty, even at 3%. And I've had a 16 lately, and it sort of melted in, and it's in that quincy kind of spectrum. It's quite a beautiful wine. So what I started doing, I think from 18 onwards, was picking the Muscat really early with the Chardonnays.
Okay. Yeah. So you are picking them separately?
So it depends. It depends totally on the vintage. Some vintages will pick the Chenin and the Verdelho together and press them together. There's all kinds of possible co-fermentation permutations, and we've had all of them and we've had none of them. We've had some vintages where everything's separate, some where 3 grapes are fermenting together. Depends on the weather, on the yield, on the ripeness, everything.
And the goal is,
it's just one wine, one place, a few different grapes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really an outlier in the Hemel-en-Aarde. It's obviously completely different to every other Hemel-en-Aarde wine.
And it's also an outlier, as you say.
It's an outlier in our portfolio of wines.
In the Alheit sort of range.
What Hans has also done now is planted quite a lot of bush vine stuff, which is super, because the original vineyard is a trellis vineyard. Okay. Which was planted in 2010, and then I think 4 or 5 years ago, he planted a little bit of bush vine Chardonnay, and then sequentially planted some Chenin and some Roussanne bush vines. So yeah, the wine will continue to be that sort of original group of grapes, and we'll have some younger bush vine stuff and some older trellis stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's I suppose
it's a developing project.
It's a developing project.
Yeah.
And I know it's a bit of an odd duck.
Do you find it tough to be, because obviously these vineyards are, most of them are old and they have a certain character inbuilt in them, and you're there to sort of, just carry it along, whereas here you seem to be making more transformative decisions. I mean, you could make this in a myriad of styles and they would probably equally represent the place. How do you manage that?
It's been
those decision makings, if everything happens slowly and you don't make quick decisions.
Well, one of the blessings of Hemel-en-Aarde is that everything ripens really slowly.
Okay.
Yeah, so you've got ages to think about when you're going to pick.
Yeah.
But on a zooming out a little bit on an identity level, and that's a level that I'm very interested in. Thinking like, what is the purpose of the wine? What is the identity of the wine? What is it showing? Yeah, then Hemel-en-Aarde, where the other wines are like really clearly, they have a very specific identity and purpose. Hemel-en-Aarde is way less easy to kind of pin down and explain.
Yeah.
And I suppose it can seem almost like frivolous, and playful, and experimental. And I think that's pretty much what it is. It is.
Yeah, it seems like more exploratory than experimental.
It wants to be a serious wine. I've always wanted it to be a serious wine. And I think it's there now. I think the last few vintages, it's a very serious wine, and it's getting very, very good reviews. But where with the heritage wines, it's so easy to communicate about what they do and why they exist.
Yes.
Whereas Hemel-en-Aarde exists for a different reason. It's a result of a friendship, a partnership, some left field ideas about like a blank canvas and what are we going to do. And let's not make a boring wine. Let's make something exciting.
And something has evolved over time, hasn't it?
Yeah, look, the vineyards stayed the same, but I think my approach to the vineyard has probably improved.
But the wine certainly changed style over time.
Well,
but as you say, it's better down the last few years.
Picking the muscat earlier is good. And then we have vintages with quite a bit of botrytis in them, which I personally like quite a lot in dry wines. I think they're very attractive, and some with less. But yeah, it's a wine which, I've often thought about it, like, why does this wine exist? Because we do try to make like relatively grand statements of purpose with the other wines, and I suppose the simple answer is it exists because we are great friends with the Evans family and we wanted to make a cool wine together.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's actually carved out a niche. It's got a hell of a following now. Especially in the restaurant scene as well.
Yeah, and it's generally a bit more accessible as well in terms of pricing.
I kind of, because Cartology was our main calling card, and these were young vineyards, I sort of priced it below Cartology, and it's kept that trend. But I wonder now if that was the right decision, because it actually is a single vineyard field blend. Even if it was a blank canvas and they're young vines, in concept, it's still quite an exciting concept to make this wine from this really like marginal place, and then have a few different grapes doing their thing. I do wonder sometimes if I'd known then what I know now, if we would have just planted Chenin and different parts of Chenin, and then had like a Hemel-en-Aarde Chenin, and then it would have fit in more easily with the rest of our range of wines.
Yes.
But I don't know.
But then it wouldn't be less of a partnership, it seems, maybe?
Well, no, Hans would have been cool with it.
I'm sure he would have, but I mean, less...
It would have just
less
been
unique.
Yeah, it would have been less exciting in some ways. I still get most excited when the Roussanne is ready to go. Freaking love that grape.
Roussanne is
it's an awesome wine grape. It's a very difficult grape to farm, and it's full of issues in the vineyards, but it's a really cool grape. And don't tell Peter Allen I said this, but I get really excited when the Chardonnay is coming in. It's a fantastic wine grape to work with.
And Chardonnay tastes good.
Yeah,
so.
it does.
Yeah, it tastes delicious.
So it's a cool playground for me because it gives me a chance to mess around with other grapes and have fun. And as I said, very forgiving, always unbelievable acid. It's not like the Swartland where it's not forgiving at all. If you miss it, you miss it. But with Hemel-en-Aarde, you don't really ever miss it. You can pick pretty late and you've got fantastic acidity. So
cool. Very cool. And then
in the sweetie,
last bottle we have here, Lost and Found.
Yeah, Lost and Found. So we only made this in one vintage, and that was in 2019. Well, that's not strictly true. We only released one vintage. That was 2019. Yeah. So in 2011, when we were getting going, we were in contact with Rosa, and we already had our game plan. You know, what we wanted to do, the vineyards that we were going to work with, we kind of knew what was coming our way. And then she said, look, there's a really, really old vineyard of Hanepoort in the Breda Cliff. It's going to the Cape, and the farmer's willing to let it go somewhere else. Are you keen? And I was like, maybe, I'm not so sure. And then she said, no, it was planted around the time of the Second Boer War. And I said, okay, that sounds very, very interesting, because it was just a honeypot for me. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
You know, it's properly, like, really, really attached to the
Queen Victoria was alive. Oh, okay.
I think I'll make that, yeah. So we started in we tried it in 2011, and, you know, we only started working with the farmer shortly before vintage. So, like, all the pruning, suckering, everything was already done. You know, stuff that we would have wanted to change. So we had that. The vines were like gorgeous, beautiful old Hanepoort vines. So that wasn't really right. And then we just couldn't get the grapes ripe enough. Picked them, and then I hung them up on like a big thing that I made on Hemel-en-Aarde for drying straw wine, right? And then the rain started on Hemel-en-Aarde. Yeah, it's gorgeous. Yeah. So we've got these beautiful photos of like extended family hanging grapes on this wonderful wire trellis that we made for drying grapes, and they did a good job and everything like that. And then it was just a dog show after that. Yeah, so we ended up making 87 litres of quite good vinegar, but no wine. For us at the time, it was quite a big financial loss. It was before we'd released any wines. It was we took a bit of a knock, learned a lesson, and then I just thought, okay, this obviously was this isn't the path that we're supposed to be on. Let's just focus on this dry wine that we're going to make. That was the plan from the beginning. Forget about the sweet wine. And I did, and then in 2017 we were busy doing a wine tasting at that old downstairs public wine bar, and this youngster walked in, and I recognized him immediately. It was the son of the farm owner, a guy called Janus, really good guy. And I mean, when I first met him, he was a schoolboy. He was probably in matric or something like that, and we got on quite well. And then like now he's this young man. He's married, and he's taken over the farming from his dad, Niels, and he came straight up and said hello and said, would you like to give it another crack? I said, okay, cool, give it a try. We tried it in 2018, and this time I didn't want to dry the grapes on Hemel-en-Aarde because it's cold and windy and can be wet in autumn.
Yeah, exactly.
So we did much better. We dried the grapes on Gevonden is the name of the farm.
Okay.
And got bloody close to making a good wine, but it wasn't quite there. And then we got, for the 29 vintage, we really threw everything at it. And it was a great vintage. We mulched it, composted it.
19.
Yeah, leading up to 19, because I'd sort of failed in 18 as well.
So you said 29.
Sorry, I meant 19. Yeah. Excuse me. Thanks. And we got Jeff to come and help with the pruning, and everything was right. It was just looking good. We got the grapes up to a good level of ripeness, and then we dried them for I think it was like 2.5 weeks on the farm on mats.
Okay.
And then pressed it. We started pressing it. I remember this pretty well. We started pressing it on the Thursday, and then I held the press at full pressure until the Monday, and it was just like the syrup coming out. And we're trying to determine the sweetness of the syrup. It's pretty difficult. You have to like halve it and just see. And it looked like it was around 54 bricks, which is pretty sweet. Yeah. So we'd achieved our goal, and we pressed everything we could out of it, put it into a stainless steel tank, and there it stayed for 9 months. And eventually stopped fermenting at just over 7 alcohol. And I don't think it's one of my favorite sweet wines in the Cape. It's a really cool vineyard. The vineyard, as I said, was planted in, the family says 1882, which could be true. It's more likely to be 1889 because that's a year or two after we first started using that Jacquet rootstock that it's planted on. But either way, it's bloody old. It's a fantastic old vineyard. It's like in front of this like low white stone wall. This old farmstead on the farm Gevonden on the Hemel-en-Aarde River. Many generations of De Wets and Boonshuis farmed this.
And this is proper grape growing country as well. I mean, it's a sea of vines.
There's a lot of vines there, but this is a rare little island of it's pretty special.
And it's from an area that isn't necessarily synonymous with high quality wine. Historically, I mean,
historically it's been a bulk producing area, but I mean we've seen what's happened now with Opstal and Willy van Sperg and these guys that are making really great wines in that area, and that's just to name a few,
Yes.
So we got the wine. I love the wine, and then the name Lost and Found came out the name of the farm is Found, gevonden in Dutch. We worked it out later we communicated with Johannes later in the year, in 2019, that him and his young wife were going to sell the farm and they were going to emigrate to Queensland, to your country. So they're now in Queensland.
Now, Queensland's its own country, by the way.
Bundaberg.
Bundaberg country.
So they're now in Queensland farming, sharp young guy, good young family. And so that this sort of, I think it's around 6 generations that had planted and tended those vines over that time was cut off, it was like lost. So I didn't want to call it Found and Lost. I think Lost and Found was a nicer name. So so we called it Lost and Found because of that. And it was kind of a bittersweet moment for me because it was sweet because like it was the last vintage of what's probably the oldest producing vineyard in the country, farmed by the same line of people, for so many generations. And it was 2019, which was a great vintage. And we were like so privileged to be able to actually make this old vineyard before the farm was sold. And I don't know the new owners of the farm very well. I know they want to keep the grapes in Rawsonville, and I know that Animo Wine's Dashbosch was making a really interesting version of this as well. But I think they were doing like a fortified, where this is a straw wine. Yeah. So I actually haven't tasted the wine, so I can't comment on the wine. But I know that they do care for the vineyard and that they are trying to do something with it. So, but I'm ignorant. I don't know what's going on with it. Okay. But this was our version, 2019.
Cool. And is it a project you would? Obviously not this vineyard.
Do again
somewhere else? Sweet wine or straw wine?
No, probably not. It's very difficult to get right. So I got my ass kicked twice before we got it right.
Yes.
I phoned Andrea a few times and the pro was like, I don't know. Yeah. Talk to me.
Mate, give us a hand.
What do you do? And she was very helpful.
Cool.
And but I admire the people that do straw well wine every year. Wine well every year. It's not that easy to do right. Yeah. Yeah. So what Chris and Andrea are doing is pretty impressive actually. Very cool. And Hanepoot's difficult to do it with because there's not a lot of juice in there. They're very fleshy grapes.
Yes. Full of pectin, isn't it? Yeah.
It's kind of tricky.
It's slippery.
So it was anyway, we got a good result.
Cool.
I also didn't do it in barrels. I did it in stainless because I just wanted to keep it clean. I was worried that like this is one shot. I'm not gonna. I don't want to get this into barrels and then VA and all of that. I just wanted it clean and fine.
Minimal risk.
Minimal risk. The wine's got more than enough personality of its own already. It's fireworks. The nose. Anyway.
Two more things, and then I'm going to let you go to the Swartland.
Cool.
What are they? First one is the Red Project.
Yes.
What's next for Alheit Vineyards? You've already sort of hinted at the Red Project. I mean, you've made a few red wines here and there.
I've played with red wines. Some of them are better than others. We made a 2017 Cab Cinza kind of thing called Wine Dark Sea, which is one of those white label projects that we have for the mailing list, and I thought that was quite a good. I love that wine. I thought it was really lekker. But red wine, I'm kind of fascinated with Syrah in the Cape. I love Cully's wines, and I love Rhiannon and Lucas's wines, and there's lots of other Syrahs that I really love, like straight Syrahs.
So it's Porcelenberg, Van Lockenberg.
That's just
because they might not know.
All right. Okay.
Know the people's names.
So like Porcelenberg, Sons of Sugarland, and Boschkloof, and then Van Lockenberg, and that's just to name 3 out of many.
Do you have a preference for Epilogue versus Sons of Sugarland, made both by the same person?
I respect Epilogue a lot, and I had a bottle in November or October on the fishing trip that we do every year. But there's just something about that raw Sons. That grit, I like it a lot. It appeals to a certain part of my personality.
Plus, you've got a bit of concrete in the winery already, so
I do. I do. So Syrah is something that I really dig, but I can't make it under this. It's not going to work.
Why not?
Well, philosophically, it's just not. It's not going to fit in with the deep, Van der Stel era heritage or Van Riebeck era heritage kind of thing that we're trying to.
You can't be sort of have bipolar and have one philosophy for the whites and one philosophy for the reds. Or
I prefer not to.
Okay.
But I want to make Syrah. I've got a very good buddy in Hermanus called William Fogwell. He's not a winemaker, but he really digs wine, and he helps me a lot in harvest time. So we've got a little Syrah project going on the side.
Oh, nice.
Yes, so I will indirectly be making Syrah under the Fogwell name.
This will be sitting here in 5 years' time when we chat again, hopefully.
So I've got Donovan help me with some grapes from his Ongegend, which is his Ava vineyard. It's such a great vineyard.
Mineral.
Yeah, Donovan Raal, sorry. And then that's the nice thing about the Cape, by the way. If you don't know the Cape, the winemakers do actually help each other here. And then on Caribib, they've got a really interesting southern slope vineyard that we're getting some grapes from there. So it's kind of Swartland, Stellenbosch, Syrah.
Oh, very cool.
I'm excited about it.
Okay.
And that'll give me a chance to make my Syrah.
Okay.
And be able to drink that next to the fire. Plus, Suzaan drinks a lot of red wine, bro.
Right.
And I don't make a lot of red wine.
Yeah. She's bankrupting you.
Yes. So I need to make some red for my lady. And then when she's back on the floor and the kids are out of the house, then she can make the red wine. And
Nice.
And then the other project is, I told you earlier, I think it'd be cool to talk to Joanne or, to Tim, James, about Pontac. Joanne did a really cool essay a few years ago. I think it was in 2020 or 2019.
I think it was through the COVID period, I think.
Okay,
she wrote
so the history of Pontac, or just the history of Pontac, but something about the history of it, and also like the positive feedback that it created in what was the closest thing that they had then to wine criticism, or to wine review, and it was super positive. It was just like really considered an absolutely amazing red grape.
Yeah. Well, Tyrrell from Newstenberg is replanting it on his farm.
Cool.
Yeah.
And more guys should.
And it was historically there as well, back in the early 1900s.
So I know Hartenberg is replanted.
Okay.
Yeah. So Pontac obviously has a just I'm like a moth to a flame with that thing, because it's just got all the history that I'm looking for.
It's got heritage written all over it, doesn't it?
It's got heritage written all over, baby. So that's a grape that we know goes back to at least the Van der Stel era.
When was the last great Pontac you drank?
The last good Pontac I drank was a very good Pontac, was a barrel sample from Thistlein Weed. They had the barrel sample of a clean block.
Okay.
But there's just been nothing to drink.
Yeah.
Hartenberg bottled their last one in 2000, and I think the vines were pulled out because they were so virused.
Yes.
And I haven't had many Hartenbergs, so I don't know. So we're taking a big gamble.
I'm not sure how many people have had a great Pontac because of the,
there's just none around.
So it's all via all this information, and it's almost by hearsay almost.
Yeah, so I hope that William Wilberforce was right, and that all these other guys that Joanne quotes were right when they said it was a hell of a grape, so we'll find out. So what we've done last year, we planted a hectare on Niverdam.
Oh, cool.
And we are planting another 2 hectares next year.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So
very, very cool.
We will have a Pontac at some stage.
Yeah.
And I just hope that it's good.
Maybe a rosé like the Pinotage.
Well, you can't, because
it's dark anyway.
Yeah, the juice is red, isn't it? Yeah, so you can't do it. So it's a strange grape, and apparently a wonderful grape, and we're going to give it a go.
Yeah, very cool.
I'm very excited about it. And if it doesn't work out, then it's 3 hectares is a lot of risk to take, but somebody's going to do it, and I'm keen to do it.
Very cool.
So, it won't.
Well, it sounds like you're not alone either, so it's going to be interesting to.
So I know Carl and them also planted the year before us.
Yes.
And at Hartenberg, and I hope that they, make a top shelf ready. I don't know what their plans are with it.
Yeah.
Certainly, it could give the wrong impression of Pontac if they come in and it's like a cheapy table wine. I don't think they will do that though. Yeah. I don't know what they're going to do. Yeah. And then Tyrrell, I don't know. I didn't even know that he'd planted. I'm excited that he has. Yeah. It's really, really cool.
So he's the first documented evidence of. I think I'm getting this right. Sorry, Tyrrell. You can tell me if I'm wrong here. The first documented award for wines that Newstenberg Farm had for the back in the 1905, 03, somewhere there, was for Pontac.
All right. Etienne showed me some literature. I can't remember if it was Pongratz or Perold, or one of the early writers, that the top Pontacs were usually around the Paarl area on granite, wild granite soils. So that's all I've got.
Yeah, right.
So hopefully we can turn out something decent.
I mean, Tyrrell's a pretty studious guy, so I'm sure he's done his research.
I also know Urban in his red field blenders planted some. I don't know how much, but he would have.
Yeah.
He definitely would have.
And the last thing I wanted to chat to you about, you've already sort of answered it a little bit, is what are you drinking at the moment? What are you being inspired by? What are you? I mean, you've mentioned a few people throughout, mostly from South Africa, international and local. What are you excited by wine-wise?
Yes, David. To be very frank, earlier on when we had more time. And we didn't own any land. Firstly, there was just more time available and there was more money available. I had actually a budget for benchmarking wines. And then I would, drink a lot of interesting wine, and I could probably answer your question better. But the last sort of winery that I discovered, which is not that recent, it's a few years ago now, that I thought, wow, these guys are really doing great stuff, was Hemel-en-Aarde, obviously.
Okay, yeah.
I love the frankness of the wines. They're really like they're on the greener side, but they're like really honest and frank and just beautiful normally.
Very transparent.
Yeah, I love their wines. Got salty wines, especially love the Tenerife wines, and I also like that. I think it's called Mignon. I think from Galicia.
Yes.
Galicia.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Happy days. Yeah.
Happy days. So those guys are cool. I've tasted some wines from a buddy of mine in Argentina, a guy called Matias Riccitelli.
Okay.
And I like what he's doing. I like his whole
Whereabouts in
setup.
Argentina is he?
He's based in Mendoza, but he travels like I do.
Okay.
Except that I drive 5 hours to Skurfberg. He does like 12 hours to Patagonia.
Okay, right.
And he's got really interesting stuff in Patagonia.
Okay.
So I like what he's up to. But he's got a lot of different SKUs. So, but he's got this Riccitelli label, and I've had a Sem and a Chenin from that label, and they're really great.
Cool.
Really great wines. So I like what Matias is doing. And then obviously locally, there's just so many stars. There's these fantastic wineries locally. I don't know if it's worth talking about all of those guys. And at home, like the biggest treat for us at home at the moment is if we, we've gone through all kinds of phases, but now when I came back from France during the the World Cup.
Yeah, very important
Business
wine-related business at the Rugby World Cup.
After the quarter final, came home with a half a kilo of.
Siles gets the bill, by the way.
Half a kilo of Brebis Pyrenees sheep's milk cheese, and then like a kilo of 18-month Comté.
Yeah.
And so that Comté, it's my wife and I with like a old Amontillado.
Oh, nice.
That's my thing. That for me is like, I dig wines that are salty and umami kind of wines. I like Van Jorn a lot. I like sherry.
Yeah.
Richard Kelly had that whole thing going on with those Fondion wines. I don't know if you ever got to try one.
I know the Fondion wines.
Crazy.
Very well.
So that kind of thing, I really dig that.
Well, very well. Yeah.
I love those kind of things. So these oddities and these old Ford. I like Teppelsfield. Going there was really cool for me. Yeah. But in terms of like dry, bright whites, I still dig what the Cape is doing.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
And
Portugal,
obviously Syrah.
of course.
Yeah. Huh?
Yeah, and I really like those false-based Syrahs a lot. I just like them. I mean, I know that they're really peppery, and that some people think it's over the top, but I just dig it. I don't care what people think. I like it. Yeah, I like pepper.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
Awesome.
Clarke,
Butchie, thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Love to the wife and kids.
Really, you're one of the most, after what?
Best looking winemakers.
Oh, that's what I thought. Yeah, they just ripped the words right out of my mouth.
That's my rosy cheeks.
Yeah, you're making me blush now. No, it's been phenomenal to view your and Susie's evolution. I wasn't right there at the start, so I wasn't in the country right at the start. But we arrived, I think, the year after you made your first wine.
For us from the beginning, I remember the first Cape wine.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's been phenomenal to see your persistence, your execution. I talk about this a lot in terms of everyone's got great ideas, but not many people can execute their ideas very, very well.
Thanks, man.
You've been one of the few people to be able to do that consistently and at a super high level.
Appreciate it.
Throughout. You're now one of the most influential people in the wine industry, not only in South Africa, but I think globally, especially with Chenin.
Thanks, bud.
You're in the conversation every time someone talks about high-end white wine, and especially obviously Chenin as well.
Thanks. I didn't know that.
It's phenomenal. No, yes, you did.
Well, I'm not on social media.
No, you know.
I appreciate it.
You know. It's fine. It's
I
okay.
do know.
Yeah, I know. It's
I'm
okay.
just faking some humility.
Yeah. But it's been phenomenal, and it's amazing to see your energy and your generosity as well. I mean, you're always very open. You help people when they need it, or even when they don't need it. Even when you think when they can be, when you think you can help, you tend to help.
Thanks.
And the wines are, well, if you don't know the wine, drink them. It's not even a question. It's not even an option. If you like white wine, then you like Chris and Susie's wines. So thank you very much. I look forward to chatting to you in 5 years' time.
See you in 5 years, brother.
We'll have a few more bottles on the table, maybe.
All the best with
and maybe next time we can open one.
Maybe next time we won't open a Chablis, we'll open one of these.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Cheers.